Chicago Bears more than I do masturbating, and that is a lot.
Then, with 3 seconds left, Bob Avellini throws a 30-something-yard touchdown pass to Greg Latta, and the Bears win, and I literally shit my pants. I swear to God, I literally did.
Eric Kramer, for me, I love the guy. He's a tragic figure. I mean, he embodies all that is.
If they don't run the ball here, I'm going to vomit. I swear to God.
Look, I don't mean any disrespect. He just didn't play that well. Not for a guy of his caliber.
You know, they won, but I'm going to be miserable all week because they stunk.
I don't really have any recollection of that at all, but I guess perhaps I blacked it all out.
So, Dan, tape is the ultimate tool for scouts and for coaches to evaluate players, to detect plays and so forth. And they spend hours looking at tape, right? Why do they so often get shit wrong?
Ladies and gentlemen, Dan and Aldo.
Oh, yeah. I cannot tell, Dan Aguirre, if this applause is for the firing of Chuck Pagano. You know it was a firing. They say he should resign, but he's gone nonetheless. Or they're applauding for you, my friend. How are you?
I'm well. It took me a couple days. I'm glad we didn't do the show yesterday.
Yeah, I hear you.
Because I was still so unhappy, and I know it's like so many people will say, "Well, that's your own fault for getting invested. You knew they sucked. We told you they sucked. I fucking told you so." Man, fuck you. I'm a Bears fan, so I care. I fucking care, and like I said, it took me 2 days to get over it. Like I got laid. I masturbated a few times. I watched a lot of political stuff, anything to get my head out of my own ass after that fucking game. So, I'm happy that Pagano's gone. And like you said, this was certainly a mafia moment. Like, look, man, you gotta, this is the offer you can't refuse. You have to fucking leave.
That's right.
But there needs to be more, but I don't know if we're going to get it.
Yeah, it is not confirmed yet, but it is expected that Bears general manager Ryan Pace and head coach will return for the 2021 season. That's according to multiple reports, including Dan's good friend, Dan Wiederer of the Chicago Tribune. You want to tell people what happened with between you and Dan Wiederer?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just a little small pubic hair on his balls, I would think. But a few weeks ago, I just, every time I read his tweets, I'm like, God, this guy is just so negative. It's not even like, he doesn't even hide it, but he won't admit it. Everything has this spin, like, well, the Bears have won 3 in a row, but did you know Mitch isn't any good? And then someone will be like, dude, you really hate Trubisky. And then he'll like go, 6-7 tweets deep trying to argue that he doesn't have a problem with him when during his entire run, every tweet is something negative about, Trubisky anytime he comes up. But anyway, on Monday, I was like, man, during the game, he was saying some shit that was bothering me. And I was like, fuck this. I'm going to be positive. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to send any anti-defensive fucking tweets or texts. Today, I'm cheering. And I was happy with the first half. Mm-hmm. I mean, I know that they could have done more, but I was like, man, the defense, they held the Saints to 7. That's a win. Mm-hmm. That's a win. And you're in the game. So having said that, I was reading Dan Wiederer, and of course, he was being negative about the first half. And I was like, God damn this guy. But, fuck it. I'm not going to say anything. And then on Monday, he puts this spin out where he's like, I've been covering the Bears so long, and they've only made the playoffs twice since I've been here. They haven't won a game. They've only had one winning season. They haven't made it to the division. This fucking guy, if you hate your life so much, go fucking wash cars or something. Like he's so unhappy being a fucking sports writer, or better yet, go to the Lions. They haven't won a playoff game, but one time, thanks to our guy Eric Kramer. Other than the Eric Kramer win in '91, their last playoff win was 1957.
But Dan, let me let's say this. I got the tweet right in front of me. I've got it up on the screen for our viewers to see. You could take this in a totally different way. I mean, it could be just a straight report. I'm wrapping up my 8th season in the Bears beat. The organization hasn't been to the league quarterfinals during that time yet. 55-73 in that time. 1 winning season, 0-2 in the playoffs. Those are all facts. You know, he's not saying, woe is my life. God damn, I'm going to kill myself if this team doesn't do better. I hate my job. You're reading all that stuff into that tweet.
I can't disagree with you on that one particular text. However, I would say if you look at the totality, if you listen to his radio hits, if you read all of his tweets, everything is negative like that. And that's his out. He could always say, oh, I'm just giving you the facts. But it's always when you read it all together, he's always fucking negative. And that's why the only time he's ever responded to me, because again, I admit I'm just a guy. I'm not important. And I'm not saying that, oh, poor me. It's just fucking life. I'm like one of like 100 billion people on Twitter. So what? But the only time the dude's ever responded to me is when I called him Mr. Negativity. So that resonated with him. He did not like being called that. And we went back and forth a little bit a few weeks ago. And again, so I'm not the only one who thinks that, because calling him negative made him lose his shit. He said that people are shouting at me. The mobs are shouting at me. Mr. Negativity. Like, really, dude, I'm shouting at you because I sent you a fucking tweet? Anyway, so he breaks the news. I didn't see it because I had just unfollowed him, which again it doesn't matter. I'm just one dude. I didn't block him or anything. I just didn't want to see his shit every day. And again, I just feel like I'll be happier because I don't want to fucking troll the guy. I don't want to just be responding. But every time I see his thing, it just makes me want to fucking punch a wall or something every time he speaks. I just fucking hate this guy.
Johnny Santucci says that Wiederer disguises his disgust of the Bears with facts, Aldo. Don't you get it, Aldo? So maybe that's what I'm missing here. Also, I got to respond to this. The Factor One says, Aldo, talk about Matt Nagy's demeanor. He looked more excited for 2021 than upset at losing to the Saints. He knew he was coming back before the game. You could see it. And you know what? The Factor number one, I agree with you. There was something about that post-game press conference that did not sit well for me. It was as if, yeah, I expected we were going to lose, and actually I was plotting for it. I took over the play calling from Bill Lazor, and I made sure that our offense stunk because I wanted to make sure George McCaskey or Ryan Pace or no one in the organization would force me to bring this quarterback back who I hate. And so I'm cool, man. I'm cool with the way we lost. I don't give a shit. I planned it this way. I knew we weren't going to win the Super Bowl, so why should I give a shit that we got blown out? I mean, this team was 0 for 9 on third down conversions, and the only third down they converted was on the last series of the game. And then I go back to look at the tape, and on a lot of these third downs, there weren't any receivers going past the first down marker. It was like Nagy was calling plays. It's 3rd and 5. All the receivers were a yard away. 3rd and 10. All the receivers were 2 or 3 yards away. And I get it. He's probably afraid of having Mitch Trubisky throw downfield. But if you're going to coach like a pussy, then you should go coach in Detroit, not in Chicago.
The worst part about that is, and again, and not that I'm disagreeing with anything you're saying, but assuming that what you're saying is accurate, that he was afraid to let Mitch take some shots early on. The 2 shots that he took were great throws. The one that Wems caught and was challenged, and then they said, okay, no, he did catch it. And then of course the big play in the end zone that he dropped, was that the first quarter?
Yes, so absolutely. The second series.
Perfect fucking throw. So, but both times he threw downfield early on, you would think, well, maybe Mitch has got it today, because both were good throws. So again, it gave me some hope, but the rest of the game, he didn't take any shots. The thing that really pissed me off was, you're down. I guess it was 21-3, and it's 4th down, and you're in the 4th quarter, and this motherfucker's punting. What are you doing? I mean, it's now or never. You can't punt. You're down 18 points. You have to go, and he's punting. Oh, God. Again, that was surrender to me. That was throwing in the fucking flag. How could you fucking punt when you're down 18 points and there's like 8 minutes to go in the 4th quarter? It's inexcusable. Do you disagree? I mean,
I don't disagree.
Like,
I agree with everything that you're saying, and I agree with a lot of what people are saying in the chat room. PZ says Nagy went to the John Fox school of bullshit. I agree with that. I mean, I think I think Ryan Pace learned it from John Fox, and now Matt Nagy has learned it from Ryan Pace. You know, I think, didn't we talk about this last week, Dan?
Yeah, but the thing is, if John Fox were coaching, and again, I don't want to give him any credit, but if he were coaching,
right,
David Montgomery would have at least had 85, 90 yards against the Saints.
Oh my gosh. David Montgomery would have had 1,400 yards rushing. There's no doubt about it in my mind. He would have had an easy 300 yards more rushing this season. And it's a shame. Although I do remember John Fox not realizing he had Jordan Howard on his roster, and he was alternating carries with him and Jeremy Langford, and it wasn't until Langford got hurt that all of a sudden they discovered, hey, wait a minute, this Howard guy he's a lot better than not only Langford, but most of the guys in the league. So I don't know. It's really, really difficult to assess the work of John Fox. I hated it when they hired him, and I hated him during his tenure here, but there were clearly certain things that he did that we have to look back on and respect. He rebuilt the culture. He led a really good, solid defense. He and Vic Vagina.
Vic Vagina.
So, but nonetheless, we let's talk about Chuck Pagano. Chuck Pagano is gone. He has retired. Your immediate reaction when you heard the news? I know you didn't hear it from Dan Wiederer, but what was your reaction when you heard the news about Fangio being gone?
Big vagina. About Chuck Pagano, I immediately said, this is like, I was reading it. Oh, fuck, thank God. And then immediately 5 seconds later, I thought, oh, they forced him out. And then I thought, oh no, that means he's going to be the scapegoat. Mm-hmm. But it was all in that order. I thought, oh, that's great, or thank God. And then, I bet you they forced him out. I bet he didn't retire. They told him he's done, or he could be fired or retire or whatever. Oh no, they're going to bring Nagy back now. Exactly. And I'm not flip-flopping because, as I've said, Nagy is the coach. Mm-hmm. So obviously I was rooting for him down the stretch because by proxy, he represented the Chicago Bears. And I would like to have him fired now, but if he's the coach in 2021, I'm going to be rooting for him. Mm-hmm. That's just the way it is. And I so many people that are going to say, well, you should have rooted them for them to lose that. I disagree.
Yeah.
I want them to win.
I of course I don't care who is freaking coaching. Prove me wrong. If they hire a coach, a defensive coach, a coordinator, a GM, and I don't like them, prove me wrong if indeed I express myself that I don't like the hire. I love my Chicago Bears. I have my own opinion on what they're doing right or what they're doing wrong, but it doesn't matter. I still am pulling for them every step of the way. Now, my thoughts on Pagano, that was the easiest thing of this offseason to predict, that he wasn't going to be back. I mean, he doesn't
deserve to be back.
He does not deserve to be back. And clearly the league has passed him up, and he was trying to make adjustments to his schemes to follow trends in the NFL, but he just didn't know how to use those new schemes with the players that he had. And so his play calling was terrible. His use of personnel was terrible. And I'm glad that at 60 years old, I wish him nothing but the best, but I'm glad that the Bears are going to get a new defensive coordinator. It will probably be, my guess is that Jay Rogers, the defensive line coach, the former quarterback who played college football quarterback. And in fact, it's ironic that Pagano just 2 weeks ago spoke for about a minute in a press conference about how good Jay Rogers was at this and that and so forth. And he had that quarterback mentality. So he taught the defensive linemen how to kind of read what the quarterback was doing and so forth. My guess is that Jay Rogers will take over the team because any of the top defensive coordinators over there, they're going to look at, Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy and say, you guys are probably not going to be there very long, given all the problems you got. Now, I could be wrong. There could be some defensive coordinators over there who might be assured that Khalil Mack is going to be around and that Akeem Hicks is going to be around and some of these other studs. And they'll say, yeah, I know how to utilize those guys. So I'll come on board. But my first guess is that Jay Rogers is the guy.
I hope that they hire someone that has some like street cred to them, in the sense that if it goes off the rails next season, especially if there are fans in the stands again, which still feels like a huge if right now. I mean, it's only January, but I've had my first COVID shot, the first of 2, but most people, how many have? That's what I'm saying. But Are we going to have people in the stands by September? And if they are, the first moment something bad happens in Chicago, Soldier Field's going to erupt, and rightfully so, at Nagy and just boo the shit out of him. So what I'm saying is I hope they hire a coordinator that could take over as coach in the event that they'd have to do something in midseason or early in the season. But you don't want to be in a situation you're like, well, who would you hire then? Like, I'm Dan Weeder. Who would you hire? I think you have to stay with Nagy. Real quick, I just want to say as well, I was thinking a moment ago, if somebody was on Bears Barroom and let's just say it's a show that you weren't on, but you were just hearing over and over and over that this person was doing something bad, whether that was, talking shit about somebody, was doing personal jabs. At the end of the day, you as the owner have to step in, right? You have to say something, because even if it's not your fault, you're sort of held accountable for that. Is that fair? After
a certain point, you hope as a manager or a leader of an organization, you hope people can work it out themselves. But if they come back to you and say, hey, I've tried to talk to this person, I can't work it out, then of course you got to step in and take care of it.
Right. So if you're Matt Nagy and you see that Chuck is not doing the right things, I guess what I'm trying to say is, at some point, maybe this is Matt Nagy's fault too. Maybe he signed off for everything Chuck was doing. Like, I could see Nagy coming in the first day as a coach, like, okay, Vic, you do what you do. You've been here before longer than me. It's my first head coaching job. But by the time he's in year 2 and year 3 and already been awarded head coach of the year, and he's obviously pretty, I don't want to say arrogant, but he definitely believes in himself. So I think if he really thought Pagano was calling an inefficient scheme that he disagreed with, he would step in. So my theory is, what I want to say is that, in my opinion, he is single-handedly ruined Eddie Jackson, somewhat ruined Khalil Mack, Robert Quinn, and on the other side of the ball, they fucking killed the development of Anthony Miller. And honestly, they kind of killed Tariq Cohen. Cohen had a really awesome 2017 under John Fox and hasn't really done much since Nagy took over. Who has he coached up is what I'm trying to say. Who has really flourished under Matt Nagy's watch with the Bears?
Jeez. Darnell Mooney.
Okay. Yeah, I'll give you that. Other than Mooney, maybe Cole Kmet came on toward the end of the year.
I can't really. I think you're making a fabulous point. I clearly this guy was brought into the organization because he was considered an offensive genius, an innovator. His first few games calling plays, he had the first play, the T formation. He had 3 guys over here and 5 guys over there, and blah blah blah. He did all these innovative things. And in hindsight, what he was doing was he was trying to disguise the fact that he did not trust Mitchell Trubisky. I mean, when you've got, Tariq Cohen throwing touchdown passes, a lot of that has to do with I'm not trusting my quarterback, so I'm going to inject all these trick plays. So, and it was a failure. He just over the last 3 seasons, he's proven that he cannot coach guys up, and that he cannot coach an offense. Johnny Santucci says that David Montgomery is perhaps somebody that he has coached up. What do you think of that?
By accident.
That's right. It wasn't his choice. It was Mitch Trubisky's choice.
It's like the Bears, they had no offensive line in that game in Tennessee. Like everybody was out. It's like, okay, we really, really have to run the ball just for these guys' sake and our quarterback's sake.
Mm-hmm.
Foles is going to get killed today. We have to fucking run the ball. It just kind of like, you remember last season against the Chargers, we had such a good game running the ball. And afterwards he said, I wasn't brought here to run the I formation. So he does not want to run the ball.
Yep.
I know, and he said it in his post game again that, well, it's clear we need to run the ball. He's just saying that. He always says that. He has no commitment to running the ball. And like we both agreed, and I'm not disagreeing with Tooch per se, because David Montgomery did have a really strong second year.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like it was in spite of Coach Nagy to me, and it just feels like David Montgomery, like we said, would have had at least 300 more yards if John Fox had been coach,
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And I want to, if you've listened to this show or followed this show at all over the last, how many weeks we've been doing this? 15, no more, 20 weeks. You know that we usually at the top of the show, we do Dan's media montage. He collects a bunch of takes from What the Loco and sometimes national media.
I couldn't do it this week.
Yeah, well, I don't blame you.
I couldn't do it. You combine it with me being lazy, combine it with me being depressed after the game, combine it with I just didn't have the time because of work. I just didn't want to get into it. I listened to a little bit of Carmen and Yurko today because they had Allen Robinson on.
Mm-hmm.
I heard a little bit of Cap on Monday.
Mm-hmm.
And other than that, I listened after the game was over that night for a few minutes to Hub. And Hub was like advocating bringing Nagy back right then and there and was saying he's done a good job or done a fine job. And I was like, fuck this. I don't even want to listen to it anymore now. So I just didn't want – nobody knows anything more than we do right now.
That's right.
And like Allen Robinson – he didn't say anything. I mean, but what could he say on the show? He like when he was, like I said, on Carmen. He said nothing was substance because again, he can't. Right. The only person that I thought that I've heard in the last 2 days that said anything, it was like, oh fuck, did you hear that? Was Trubisky when in his post game. Did you hear his presser when he said something about basically questioning the culture?
Absolutely. That was huge.
Yes.
And for those of you who did not hear that, it was Mitchell Trubisky basically saying that, we've allowed people to get away with certain things. And I immediately thought, bet you he's referring to Javon Wims, because when Javon Wims threw that punch against CGJ, whatever his name is, from the Saints in that November game, he should have been released, and we should have picked up some veteran, any veteran who could play a little special teams and could play the wide receiver and learn the offense quickly and replace him. And that veteran probably would have caught that pass.
Or number 88.
Or number 88, Riley Ridley.
He's a higher draft pick than Wims. Why is he in the doghouse? Even in the playoff game, Ridley didn't get in until really late, and this was after Anthony Miller had been ejected. They had the punt returner who's wearing 19. What's his name? Carter?
Mm-hmm.
He was in on offense. I was like, really?
Yep.
I had 19 in on offense. I was like, God damn, what has Riley Ridley done to Matt Nagy?
Exactly. I think there was this rumor that Riley Ridley questioned something that Nagy told him when he was coaching him up about a pass pattern. And Riley Ridley, who came out of Georgia with reports that he knew the route tree as good as any wide receiver coming out of college, he apparently questioned Matt Nagy. These are allegations. This is not confirmed by anyone, But he questioned Matt Nagy that, and since that time, he was in Riley Ridley was in Nagy's doghouse, and so I don't know. Based on what I have seen of the kid, the guy can play. He can run routes. He can get open. He's not a speedster. Javon Wims probably has a little bit of speed on him, and Javon Wims is probably a better special teams player. But at a certain point, if you're going to allow Javon Wims to punch somebody in the face and Javon Wims promote that culture, you got to believe that Javon Wims and Anthony Miller sometime during the week said, yeah, I don't give a shit what coach says. If that motherfucking Saints guy comes up into my face again, I'm going to fucking rock him. And that's probably what happened. Again, it's all speculation on my point. But despite that, what I wanted to say is regarding the media montage, we have replaced the media montage this week with a guest.
Let me set him up.
Yes.
Because I've got a question he asked me today that was really good. Now, it's going to sound simplistic, and everyone's going to say, well, that's his question.
Mm-hmm.
But when he asked it, it really resonated with me. He pondered, in his first 3 seasons with Matt Nagy, I'm paraphrasing, who do you think was more successful? Would you take, say, Matt Nagy in his first 3 years on offense, or Mark Trestman's 2 years on offense?
Ooh.
Who would you rather have? In terms of who's the head coach?
Mm-hmm.
Just take that out of it. The question was, who was more successful at calling plays in Chicago? Mark Trestman or Matt Nagy? And I have to go with Mark Trestman.
I don't think there's any doubt that Mark Trestman had a better grasp of play calling than Matt Nagy. But also, let's remember, I think, disagree with me if you disagree with me, but I think that Trestman had a better offensive roster. I mean, Brandon Marshall, Alshon Jeffrey, just coming into his own as a young player. Martellus Bennett,
Forte.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, those were some incredible offensive weapons. Incredible.
And Jay is better than Trubisky, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Okay, well, funny that you should say that, and let's keep our special guest on hold here for just a couple minutes because I'm going to play something.
He just said, God damn it. No.
Exactly. But I'm going to play something from, who was it? This is, I think it's, it's from one of the radio cuts. I heard this. I was in my car running an errand, and then I heard this, and I go, I gotta find this for Dan and I to talk about. And so it's a perfect time to put this in. And I'm forgetting who it was. I think it was Dan Parkins from WSCR Radio. And
was the Dan Weeder.
No, it was not Dan Weeder. Matt Spiegel and Danny Parkins.
Was what he was on day one. Knock on Cutler was what he was on day one was what he was on day 1,001. Right? He was making the same mistake, start to finish.
Yeah.
That's Trubisky, man.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is, man.
Tony Romo wasn't even in the stadium. Yeah, he wasn't even in the state. And he's like, and Mitch Trubisky really cuts off half the field, and he doesn't even look the other direction, does he? How the hell did you see that? Like it's unbelievable. Tony Romo would have given the Bears a better shot. Tony Romo would have converted a third down before the 59th minute of game film. I'm positive of that.
100%. The play on which he was talking about that, it was like 3rd and 9, and Mitch checks down to the left with no pressure. There's no pressure. I know you're scared from being over aggressive and making mistakes, but find the balance, young fella. You have to try and go down the field at times. And going down the field doesn't just mean throwing a 40, 50-yard bomb, which he did well a couple of times yesterday. It means throwing a 15-yard pass or a 25-yard pass, which he was terrified, absolutely terrified to do. It's so unpleasant to watch him quarterback. There was a scramble late in the game where I think he got 7, Danny, and he ran straight and then like took a hard right turn and then another left turn and then went out of bounds. And I'm watching, and my stepdaughter says, "What is he doing?" And I just turned around and said, "His instincts are terrible." And she said, "Yeah, they really are." She's watching one game. His instincts are terrible.
What do you think about that? And then we'll ask our guest his thoughts on that.
I think in contrasting the two quarterbacks, if we're talking about Cutler versus Trubisky, I think Jay had the disposition, like if you try to tell him to do something he didn't want to do, he would on national television tell you to go fuck yourself like he did Mike Martz. Juxtapose that with Mitchell. Mitchell's a good soldier, and Mitchell does what his coach tells him to do. And like he calls his coach sir, you know, and you know, I think Trubisky is just doing, maybe I'm giving him a pass. Maybe I'm a truther, as they denigrate Trubisky supporters. But I think Trubisky's just doing what Nagy wants him to do. I'm sure the game plan was don't throw it deep. And if this happens, you fucking check down and you do what I tell you to do. I'm the fucking coach. And Mitch is probably saying, yes, sir. I just, you know, whatever. I don't want Foles in here. So I better do what he tells me to do. So I think the sum of it is Mitch's lack of talent, or however they were describing it as. I think if he goes with another coach, we'll see that he's actually much better than Chicago people think. I think Matt Nagy has stunted this kid's growth tremendously.
All right. Well, let's get our guest's opinion on it. Why don't you go ahead and introduce him?
Stephen Zim Zimmerman from Denver, Colorado, or at least a suburb of Denver. Was at the Bears game in week 2 of 2019. He hates John Elway, and he's from Denver in the Mountain Time Zone, as he told me earlier. Zim?
Are you there, Mr. Sim?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, indeed.
There he is. I want to give you credit. I don't know if you heard it in our 5-hour show last week. But I also gave you credit for, you were the first person that I saw that wanted Ryan Pace, or at least thought it was plausible that Ryan Pace would move up in Ted Phillips's spot and that we would get a new general manager and a new coach.
I actually caught the whole thing, but yeah, I did hear that. I appreciate that. And yeah, it was just something that kind of came to me. I was thinking about, you know, the stuff that Pace has done is stuff that you want a president to do, but the stuff that he's done in a GM position, rather, I should say, the stuff that I hear as an argument for why you should keep Pace is all stuff that I'm like, a team president should be doing this. A general manager, like, he's supposed to be controlling the team. I don't give a shit about how good he is at business. But
so what do you think about what Aldo was playing there with Cutler and Trubisky? I think it's Nagy's fault that Trubisky plays the way he plays. I think it's Nagy's fault that Mitch doesn't want to run anymore. I think he's told him not to.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with that. I think part of it is that Mitch got scared when he got hurt, obviously. I mean, that's just a natural human instinct. You get hurt, you get scared, you don't want to do stuff anymore. But then I think it was compounded by Nagy trying to make him into this like pocket passer. And it's like, why are you getting rid of this kid's best ability? You know, he's always been good at throwing on the run, even in college. And I think it goes back even further than that with John Fox, because if you remember John Fox's offense, he was so concerned with turning the ball over that he got overly conservative in positions where he didn't need to be conservative at all. And so you got Mitch getting his first coach just pounding into his head, don't turn the ball over, don't turn the ball over, don't turn the ball over. And I think that's where he got this thing that he does where he holds onto the ball way too long and he'll run out of bounds with the ball, or he'll take a really bad sack running backwards 11 yards behind the line of scrimmage. I definitely think that Nagy didn't help anything, but I think it all started way back then. And then this guy is just such an inept offensive coach, despite everything that he's been advertised to be, that this is what we wound up with.
I agree with you. But I remember the game where Chicago was hosting Detroit, the famous Holy Moses game from Tom Brenneman, when Connor Barth missed that field goal and thankfully got released after the game, or at least the next day. But if you recall, what led up to that field goal attempt was Trubisky on this like 4th and 14 ran through the entire Detroit Lion team. Like 7 or 8 people missed him, and he was just shifting and running around. I mean, I'm not going to try to say he was better than like RG3 or Lamar Jackson, somebody that's their gig where they run, but or at least RG3 before he got hurt. But Mitch like literally ran through the whole team to get a first down, and you would never see him do that with Matt Nagy as coach.
And I think that's part of it. What John Fox wanted him to do played to a certain part of his game really well, so he did that instead. And then Nagy came in and said, don't do that anymore. And Mitch still had this idea from the last regime. And, he's getting conflicting messages at this point. And this is a guy who only started 1 year in college. So now what the hell is he supposed to think with all this? I understand that he's been playing football his whole life. And a lot of people, they say he's an NFL quarterback. He should know better than that. But when you've only played 13 college games, you're coming into a league and you have John freaking Fox as your head coach. And then your next head coach the following year is Nagy. You're going to get conflicting messages. You've got 3 different coaches in 3 years, and those are the only 3 years you've started. And long story short, I agree with you.
Let me ask you guys this, because as I was looking at tape from the playoff game, one of the things that really struck home with me is, how many times have you seen Matt Nagy do what other quarterbacks do, which is look left, then look to the center of the field, and then look right, and just adjust his whole body, set his shoulders to throw left, set his shoulders to throw over the middle, set his shoulders to throw right. In other words, process the entire field. And that's what those guys were talking about on the radio. Parkinson and Spiegel, they were saying that he just doesn't process. And I have to agree with that. While Mitch has certain strengths, and I agree that he should be running more and that you should tailor the game plan to like a Tebow, RG3 kind of approach. But as somebody in the chat room said, that it isn't sustainable for a long time, but you can win with that style. But to me, it is clear that processing is his biggest problem. Now, he made gains this year with his mechanics. We saw one of the things that he did over and over wrong over the last 2-3 seasons was that he didn't shift his weight. He didn't, power that ball through. He was throw off the back foot a lot of times. And then his left foot, his lead foot, that toe wasn't pointed towards the receiver, which is a big no-no, because if you point it a little further to the left of where you are, where the receiver is, the ball will tend to sail on you and be inaccurate. Well, he cleared a lot of that stuff up this year, but what he still could not clear up was just the processing part of being a quarterback. Do you guys, see that at all? Agree? Tell me I'm full of shit, whatever. I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
You're certainly not full of shit, and I can't absolve Mitch for everything you just said, but again, maybe some of that is on Nagy again. I really believe it is. Like the play, the way he wants the formation run, or the drop back. You got to get rid of it in 3 seconds or whatever. The play calling he's going to actually call, whatever the strategy for the play is what I'm trying to say. Calls for him to get rid of the ball quickly. Not necessarily. I don't know if Nagy wants him to look at the whole field and survey it. I think maybe he intentionally wants him to cut it off in half or one side of the field. I don't know. I'm not in Hallis Hall. I just think if he ends up, everyone points to New England, and that's obviously a location that could work. But even if San Francisco would get rid of Garoppolo and he was with Shanahan, or if he ended up in Denver, a franchise where they develop quarterbacks until recently with the Broncos. But well, I'm just saying, if he was around really good coaching, they can teach that to him. Like, why was he in? Okay, if one of the detractors, one of the things that people say negatively about Trubisky is that he can't read defenses. He can't read, at least he's good against man coverage, but not against zone, right? So, I mean, isn't some of that coaching?
Absolutely.
Isn't some of that your responsibility to teach him what the fuck to do? I mean, again, he's been with Nagy 3 years. Mitch's failure to me is Nagy's failure. And if anything else is just cause to have them both go.
I completely agree with what you're saying there, Dan, because, obviously we're not in the building and we can't say for sure, but doesn't it almost feel like this could be a result of the quote simplification that they've been doing? Who's to say that this simplification has been something that we've seen with other teams? Maybe it's Nagy not knowing how to teach that simplification. And Obviously, he's a better football coach than I'll ever be, and he's forgotten more about the game than I'll ever know. I'm just saying it's a potential that we've seen him feel like he's in so deeply over his head in certain scenarios. Why couldn't that be another one where he's basically taught this kid backwards?
I agree, and I've said this before. I strongly believe, and again, I can't corroborate this, but I think the reason he's hired so quickly is because we've already traded up and took this quarterback with the second pick in the draft in 2017. He played one season, obviously 12 games in 2017, and then we hire Nagy. To me, Nagy gets the job. I'm inferring, but I think he sold himself to say, I can teach this kid. I can make him be everything that you, Ryan Pace, thought when you drafted him.
Mm-hmm.
I can do that. That's why you should hire me. So, I mean, if he comes in and says, no, I really didn't like Mitch when I was in Kansas City, they wouldn't have fucking hired him.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, he took the gig with the premise that he could develop Mitchell Trubisky. He has not done that. So if he is fired, if we're going to move on from Mitch, then we should move on from Nagy as well.
Couple of points here. The factor one says Trubisky must throw interceptions in practice often. Maybe that's why Nagy plays it safe. And I have to agree with that because last season when the Bears had training camp open, they had 10 of them open in Bourbonnais, and I went to 9 of the 10, and Trubisky looked pretty bad in almost all 9 of them. And when I say bad, I mean that he just didn't look like he was ready to do a great job. And I was making excuses for him, he's playing against the best defense, and they are practicing things. Nagy says that after practice, we're just trying a lot of things and seeing what he can do and what he can't do. And the reality is what my eyes were seeing was that he was throwing interceptions, that he was throwing inaccurate passes. Now that was back in the beginning of the 2019 season. And I have to say that he's improved, which leads to my second point. I think that you guys are forgetting that he had one of the best quarterback coaches in the NFL in John DeFilippo. John DeFilippo became an internet star because of the way he went when he was the Philadelphia Eagles quarterback coach, how he would break down a play, how he would communicate it, his knowledge. This is what we want to do here. This is what we want to do there, and so forth. And everybody was gaga over the fact that DeFilippo was replacing Dave Ragone, who by all accounts is just a wasted piece of shit. He's a buddy of Matt Nagy. They got along so well.
Jay Cutler liked him though. He always called him Rags.
I think he's just got one of those great personalities that everybody likes him, but clearly his results with Cutler and with Trubisky aren't anything to write home about. But DeFilippo, I think that we saw some of the results, some positive results with mechanics, but it's the processing thing. You can have a really good fucking teacher, but if you can't process what the teacher is telling you and then take it out onto the football field and execute it, then you're not going to be any good. I've taught before and I've been a student before, and I've been on the stupid end of both sides where I'm either, I know I taught this well. Why don't these students get it? Or I've been on the other end where I'm the student and boy, I know this is a good teacher, but I don't know what the fuck she's talking about. So I think
look at I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, I think that's kind of Mitch's thing, is the processing thing is something that he probably can't do well. And I'm again speculating.
Well, I'm going to speculate that, again, in my opinion, I'm going to keep arguing that it's Nagy because, I mean, even when Nick Foles was in there, we can say that Nick's not this or not that, but he was Super Bowl MVP, and he did go on a run in the postseason, and he did beat us the 2018 playoffs, so he's had success that you can tangibly point to, that you cannot contradict, even if you don't like him. And what was he doing? Arguing with Nagy the whole time that he had his little run of 7 starts. They had friction. It's because Nagy doesn't know what the fuck he's doing, and how many coaches can we have on offense? The guy from Helfrich, right? And DeFilippo, and like you said, Rags and Nagy and Bill Lazor. And who else? Do we have? I mean, goddamn, like it's a collective failure because at the end of the day, there's one guy at the top, and it's Nagy. I mean, seriously, I don't want to go off on a rant here. I'm just
Please do.
If Peterson can be fired in Philadelphia after winning a Super Bowl, not even 3 years ago. I mean, it was 3 years ago in time, like that was 52. This is 55. But I'm saying that was February of 2018 when that occurred.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not even 3 years ago on the fucking calendar. If I would have told you after he beat New England, this guy will be gone before 2021, you'd be like, get the fuck out of here. Philadelphia's been wanting a winner for so long that he'll be a fucking legend there forever.
Mm-hmm.
And he's gone. So my point is, he's got a Super Bowl and beat the New England Patriots. And they said, what have you done for me lately? You got to go. And Matt Nagy's fucking resume.
36.
Sorry.
If you're comparing Peterson to Nagy,
Mm-hmm.
Peterson's like Vince Lombardi, compared to one of Don Shula's fucking Dave Shula. Not even Don Shula, like David Shula. I mean, he's a fucking bum compared to Peterson. And they fired him. So why are we holding on to Nagy? Is it money?
Peterson's a better salesman than Nagy.
There you go.
Or no, sorry, the other way around. Yes, Nagy's a better salesman than Peterson. There you go.
Mm.
Peterson basically was straight up with his ownership group. He told them, "This is what I want to do. This is how I'm going to do it. And if you don't like it, get rid of me." And they said, "Okay, don't let the door hit you." And
Do you
clearly,
think maybe that's because he's at odds with Carson Wentz and Philly's like, we don't know if we want to get rid of Wentz yet, so we're getting rid of you? I don't know. I'm just asking you.
it's possible, but it's probably more like we can't get rid of Wentz, and if you're not going to play him, that's a lot of dead money to just sit on the bench. I don't think that's really as big of a part of it, but it's got to be at least in the back of their mind somewhere. They're in this business to make money. We got to keep in mind.
Sure.
But I mean, Nagy clearly, whatever he did over the last 2 days, because all the reports have been they're still in talks. Nagy has a very long meeting with so-and-so today, and then another very long meeting with so-and-so after that. And clearly he did a good enough job selling them to save his job. Now, does that mean there's actually going to be change in addition to keeping him? Probably not, but it means Mitch is probably gone.
I agree. And I think if I were, George, I would say, look, man, if we're going to let you come back for one more year, we got to know right now, are you going to come out with the same bullshit next year trying to be Kansas City? Or are you going to do what we've done successfully under your reign of terror here, which is actually run the ball when you try to run the ball? Are you going to play to the strengths of the team, or are you just going to think you're playing Madden?
Mm-hmm.
And I would have made him go on the record and say, well, what are you going to do? I need specifics, not your dream, not these scenarios that you beat off to. Like, tangibly point to how you're going to beat Green Bay next year. Like, tell me, like, how are you going to plan? How do you plan on doing something? And if he doesn't have at least something to sell me on, like, again, I say he's got to go.
I think we're just seeing more of the same bullshit from the McCaskey family, where they're going to wait a year longer than they should to make a move. And the Bears are going to be screwed for 10 years instead of 5 because of it.
Well, funny that you should say that, because I've got another audio clip here I'd like to play for you. And now this was recorded on ESPN 1000 before the announcement that Nagy and Pace are likely to come back. Now, that is an unconfirmed report. Dan Wiederer says a league source has told him. And so that doesn't mean that we have received official word from Hallis Hall that those guys are coming back. And, they could, I've been around long enough to tell you that anything could happen with this Bears team. There was a time that they hired a head coach, and then the head coach was on the car ride back to the airport, and he heard that he had been hired, and he said, wait a minute, we never agreed on a contract. What the fuck are they talking about? I was hired. So anything can happen.
Yeah, but fuck Dave McGinnis.
Yeah, it was actually turned out to be a good thing, but then they brought in Dick Duran, and that wasn't No, well, we can talk about Dick Duran a little later, but let me play this clip first. And I think, again, it's ESPN 1000. I'll have to listen to who the broadcasters are before I can remember who it is. So here it comes.
Don't forget, when George first took over, he fired the general manager that took him to a Super Bowl just 2 years after taking him to the NFC Championship.
Jerry Angelo.
Yeah. So George has not been scared. Like, there's still the narrative out there that the McCaskies don't make moves. The McCaskies do spend money. The McCaskies do make moves. They have fired coaches. They have fired general managers after short runs.
They just haven't consistently made good decisions.
They haven't made the right moves. Right. Like firing Lovie Smith at 10-6 is a shrewd move. Now, they did not hire the right guy afterwards, nor have they gotten it right after that. They fired Jerry Angelo. They fired Phil Emery. They fired John Fox. They just haven't gotten it right, where it's led to this long drought in Bears history.
I think you and I kind of shared the same thought about all of that stuff as well. It's like, if you're going to make a change, like Lovie had a really good run here. And Lovie had a 10-6 record at the end of the year, right? And I know that the season didn't end the way that they wanted after a really quick start, but I think that the rationale for getting away from Lovie was they had made the playoffs in one of the last 5 or 6 years of his tenure.
Mm-hmm.
It's fine if you want to make that decision, but the guy you hire to replace a guy who's done a pretty good job overall, you got to find the right guy. Like, it's okay to move off of player X or coach X who's done a decent job. You just got to be right. You got to be right when you replace that guy. You've got to have a better option. Unless it's a complete freak show, circus, a circus is in town and it's a dumpster fire. And then change for the sake of change can be easily explained.
So let me start with Zim. What did you think about what Waddle and Sylvie were just saying regarding the McCaskies' bad hires?
They're certainly right to an extent. They do make moves. The firing Lovie move, I think, they said shrewd. I think that's a good word to describe it. Moving off of Emery and Trestman, they did that at the right time, but they kept Fox here a year too long, and now it feels like they're keeping Nagy here a year too long. So the other thing that I noticed that they didn't really touch on is who's the common guy that they didn't move off of through all of this, and the guy who's making all of these hires that aren't resulting in success.
Oh, could it be a guy with the initials TP? Ted Phillips?
I mean, that's what I heard there, is that they refuse to mention the guy making the hirings.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's a great point, right, Dan? It's and I got a feeling that they're still working all this out because Ted Phillips is going to be gone. And so there is going to be a new team president, whether Ryan Pace is going to be booted upstairs, be given dual duties, team president and general manager, or what. I don't know, but my gut says that Ted Phillips is done. This is a good time for him to get out. The pandemic, a lot of people who are in their 60s, mid 60s, which I think Ted Phillips is in now, are thinking retirement because they don't want to, work anymore in this kind of virus-filled environment. And so he knows they're not going to win a Super Bowl in the next year or two, or maybe even 3. And so he's gonna bail out before all of these necessary changes are going to happen, unless Ted Phillips really still believes that Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy can turn this thing around in the next year or two. And if he does, he's fucking crazy. Then he's going to stick around. And I think he's smart enough to know, this is a good time to bail.
I want to jump on the audio, if that's okay.
Sure.
You don't mind me going back.
No.
I think it's imperative to point out, first off, they brought up that he's made some moves that seem, I think the word prevailing thought was shrewd. First off, Jerry Angelo was fired in 2011, kind of for the same thing. Like after 18, we thought as a fan base, myself included, we just need a kicker. After Cody Parkey lost the Eagle game, we just have to get a kicker. Well, in 2011, the Bears were 7-3. Cutler breaks his thumb against the San Diego Chargers, and then they finish 8-8. And if they could have just gotten to 9-7, they would have made the playoffs, and Jay would have been back for the wild card game. They just needed one more fucking win. They couldn't get 2 wins without him. So they fired Jerry Angelo for his absolute inept ability to find a backup. And it didn't help when Donovan McNabb was on TV every day saying, hey, I'm from Chicago. Guess what? The Vikings just cut me. I would love to go Chicago. I'd love to play as a Bear. I'd love to help out. I'm available. No, let's keep going with Caleb Haney. So Jerry Angelo's fired on the premise that we have to have a backup quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
And then they signed Jason Campbell. And then the next year, now keep in mind, Lovey is the common denominator here. So you go 7-3 and you finish 8-8. And then the next season they start 7-1 and don't make the playoffs again. So most people, when you come out and say, oh, Lovey was fired after 10-6, that sounds so bad. Like, oh, really? 10-6, they fired him? Yeah, but it's coming after going 7-3 and finishing 8-8 and then starting that year 7-1 and missing the playoffs in both of those years. Those two things compounded is the reason that Lovie Smith was fired. And I don't criticize. It's just like Robbie Gould when you say, oh, well, why? How could they cut Robbie? Again, you got to look at the games that he missed, the kicks he missed in 2015. You got to add up his salary, his big fucking mouth, and the fact he was missing extra points in the 2016 preseason. So when they forget to look at the whole context is what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. And so again, I had to jump on the Lovey thing because people just say, oh, he was 10-6, but there's way fucking more to it. So he fired Lovey because of 2 meltdowns, and then you bring in Emery and Trestman, and they have such a horrendous 2014 that they're gone.
Mm-hmm.
So they're both gone. So you fire Trestman after 2 years. So you can't say that George isn't willing to throw the hook. Now, again, he stayed there too long with Fox. I get it. He did stay. He should have just fired him after 2016 and gone with the new coach in 17. I concur. But he did cut the cord on Lovey and rightfully so. And I liked Lovey. But at the time, he was here 9 years and made the playoffs 3 times. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
And then he cuts the cord quickly on Trestman. So where do you go with Nagy? I don't think that it's fair to George to say, well, he just stays. And I'm not trying to say Zimmerman's wrong or stupid or anything. I'm not, on just this one issue, we disagree. I don't think that George has shown a propensity to always stay too long. He just did that with John Fox. Now, maybe he's doing it again right now.
Mm-hmm.
And then you could say, well, he's done that twice. But as of right now, we can only point to that being once, in my opinion. It doesn't make me right. That's just my opinion.
Zim?
So,
I mean, to me, and granted, this was Lovey's final season, I think was my senior year of high school. So I was still
2012.
Okay. So that was my first year of college. So, but that was when I was still getting into football, and it was my first year of college. So things are a little hazy there. But from what I recall, it seemed to me personally like Lovey was a lost cause. Like, I loved Lovey. He was a great coach and he did what the Bears needed him to do. But to me, it felt like that was a year too long for him after that disaster the year before. And it was an exciting first half of the year, but it all fell apart. And I remember watching that game. God, who was it against? It was against Detroit, I believe, for week 17 that year. And if the Vikings had...
Yeah, if the Bears had beaten Detroit, which they did, we had to have Green Bay lose to Minnesota. Or, I'm sorry, Green Bay beat Minnesota.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and Aaron Rodgers and then play down, and they let what was that? Christian Ponder. Yeah. Christian Ponder got 40-some points on Green Bay that day, and that put us out.
Right. And I remember watching it that day and almost knowing that it didn't matter that the Bears had won. And if I recall correctly, the Bears game only ended about 20 minutes, half an hour before the Vikings game ended. But it was almost like it was pointless watching that game because you knew Lovey it felt like after the season before, it was such a letdown at the end of the year that Lovey, he didn't lose the team, but you almost didn't have faith in him to do it again. And again, maybe that's just me. And like I said, this was a year of my life that was very hectic, but that's just the way I remember it. So it feels like, you could argue this is the third time. And
well, let me change the subject just for a second. I'm curious on this one. So obviously you're younger than we are, and you're from a different part of the country that I'm from, obviously.
Mhm.
But my question is, so what exactly did it for you for the Bears? Because you're right there with the franchise that's gone to, a plethora of Super Bowls, that won back-to-back Super Bowl. You don't even like John Elway. That's what I'm saying. Like, why did you become a Bears fan? And when do you point to what season do you approximate that made you a Bears fan? Like I said, for me, it was Jim McMahon, seeing him on commercials and stuff. That was my guy. And before I even knew necessarily the specific story of the Bears team, I knew who Jim McMahon was. So what was it for you that made you a Bears fan?
Well, my whole family is from the Chicagoland area.
Oh, okay.
My parents both grew up on the north side of the city. And in addition to it, now that we've lived in Colorado since I was basically 5 years old. And we now own a restaurant in the Denver metro area that's completely Chicago themed. It's essentially just like a mecca for people here that just need a taste of home.
That's cool. Yeah, that's cool.
And so, yeah, I just grew up in the Chicago culture, and it wasn't just my family was the cool part. Because we had this restaurant, I'm constantly meeting and interacting with new people from the Chicagoland area. And yeah, it's just, I grew up in the culture despite growing up in Denver, Colorado.
So what's the first season that you really can point to in your head and say, that was the year that I was all in, I was diehard?
I have to remember the first year that I started actively watching the Bears was, I want to say 2003. Was that the year? So it was the year that Grossman was injured.
Well, he got hurt in 2004 in week 3 at the Metrodome.
Okay.
In 2003, we had Cordell Stewart and Chris Chandler, and Rex played the last 3 games, but got hurt in week 17. He broke his finger in Kansas City, and Cordell played the rest of the game. But anyway, yeah, he got hurt in the Metrodome in week 3 of 2004. That was the, what was that bum's name? Oh, God, they said he knew the offense. Jonathan Quinn. Oh, my God.
And then the next year was Orton's rookie year, right? Because they needed somebody else. Yeah. So that would be exactly when. And they played on either Christmas Eve or Christmas Day that year. And
played on Christmas in 2005 and clinched the NFC North and Green Bay on Christmas.
Well, then they must have played Christmas Eve the year before then, right? If that's how time went.
Potentially. I just remember 2005 because Lance Briggs had a pick 6 on Favre, and it was Rex's first start because he came back in that Falcon game because he had been out since the preseason in 2005 where he broke his ankle in St. Louis in the preseason. So they benched Orton at halftime against the Falcons on Sunday Night Football. They bring Rex back in, and the next week he starts in Green Bay, and we win on Christmas night, win the division. And then they start Jeff Blake in week 17 and set everybody down in Minnesota, and then we lose to Carolina in the playoff game. So,
hey, Michael McCullough answers that question of why are you a Bears fan? And Michael lives in western part of Maryland. And he says that he was a Baltimore Colt fan until they moved to Indianapolis. And because he was a big Gale Sayers and Walter Payton fan, it was kind of a natural transition for him to root for the Bears. But
just like Zim, then this gentleman must hate John Elway.
I bet.
I want to commend Michael McCullough there. I have another friend from the Baltimore area who was a Baltimore Colts fan his whole life. And when the Colts moved, obviously he's significantly older than me, but when the Colts moved, he had to pick a team and chose America's team, the Cowboys. So bravo, Michael. Thank you for coming over to the light side.
There you go. All right. Let us talk now about Chuck Pagano. Have you guys started to even think about possible replacements for Pagano? We were asked that in the chat room just recently, and so I wanted to maybe get your opinions. I feel like it's going to be Jay Rodgers, the defensive line coach. I mentioned that earlier in the show. Do you guys have a feeling one way or another on who potentially could be the defensive coordinator for the Chicago Bears, or maybe just somebody you would love to see but probably won't happen?
Who you want to go first?
Mr. Zim Zimmerman, our guest.
All right. Well, thank you. I have a feeling it's going to be Jay Rodgers, which I I don't know how I feel about that because he's been in the league a while and he's always just been a D-line coach. And, you know, some of these guys, they're in the spot they're in for a reason. You know, they intentionally don't move out of that position. So that also means because of that, he might not move out of that position, excuse me. And I get stuck in the I don't know what the right way to put it is. It feels like the typical Bears fan way of being hindsight is 2020, that we should have done this and we could have done that. And it feels like we should have never let Brandon Staley leave. But that's just me. It feels like it's going to be Jay Rodgers, but honestly, like I said before, he's been in that position for a while and you wonder if it's a personal choice. I have no idea where they go from there.
Rock Davis says, or excuse me, it's PZ that says Staley would be a great replacement, but Staley is a defensive coordinator with the Rams. Great success. For those of you who don't know, he was the linebackers coach here in Chicago for a while under Fangio, and then went out to the Denver Broncos, the Rams when Fangio left. And that was a huge mistake by the Chicago Bears. If they should have considered, instead of hiring Chuck Pagano, they should have considered hiring from within, whether it was the DB's coach, who is now the defensive coordinator for Fangio in Denver, Ed Donatel, or Staley, the defensive coordinator with the Rams now. Now, Staley is being rumored as a potential candidate for a head coaching job. So I think his days as a DC are limited.
Well, I they probably will. I'm not saying that either one of you are wrong, and I have no inside information. But if I were making the call, I want somebody, I kind of said this earlier, but I want somebody that's got enough cred, that's got a resume that can fire these fucking guys up, that a guy like Khalil Mack could be making $141 million and say, who the fuck are you again, Jay Raj? I want somebody that can get in his face and be like, fuck, man, you need to exert more effort. I mean, I'm just, this is off the top, man. I'm not even saying this guy is even wants to coach and he's old as shit. But I was just thinking somebody like Wade Phillips that has had so much success everywhere he's gone as a coordinator, not so much as a head coach. But just a couple of years ago, he was with the Rams and they were highly successful under his watch. Just somebody like that has a name, not just for the name, but I think part of in my opinion, this defense is complacent. Eddie Jackson specifically got paid and got fat. I mean, not literally fat in terms of girth, but in terms of lack of effort. That's why I would say to you every week, man, this team has no heart. This team has no desire. And I've said this before too. I don't mean to keep going to my greatest hits, but it's kind of like Rocky III when they need to, he gets all the success, he has all the money, and he lost his fire. And that was the whole premise. You got to regain the eye of the tiger. That's why Apollo, takes him and makes him gritty again. And that sort of overcoming that complacency is what this Bears team needs. And they need somebody that commands respect, not a dude getting his first gig. That's my opinion. Maybe somebody he hasn't been in the league a long time. I'm just spitballing here. Somebody like a Rex Ryan. There
are guys who were recently fired that are now available that are defensive primary former head coaches. You have Matt Patricia and Lovie Smith both available.
Yeah, but Lovie, I don't think he would come back just out of his own ego unless he was the head coach. And I don't want anywhere near Matt Patricia.
No, I completely agree with you on both of those points. In addition to the fact that Lovie runs a Tampa too, which just is not viable in the modern NFL.
Right. And Matt Patricia plays man-to-man 99% of the time, which is not viable in today's NFL either. So,
don't you think Patricia will end up back in New England?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Just like Josh McDaniels, we'll just come back to the nest.
Yeah. I do think that, I'm not a huge fan of the Wade Phillips hiring, but it sort of does make sense because the only way you're going to attract somebody to the Chicago Bears is if they are an older person like a Wade Phillips who will be 74 next June, And so he's going to only want to coach for another couple of years. And that's what the contract is for Matt Nagy. So a lot of the young talent out there is going to say, well, why should I go over and coach for the Chicago Bears? There's no guarantee that Matt Nagy is going to be the head coach in 2022. I just might get hired there for one season. And so that is a huge challenge for hiring anybody on the outside. So you got to look at these veteran defensive coordinators and say, hey, listen, we need your help. But my concern is that that's basically what we did with Chuck Pagano. Hey, 60-year-old Chuck, he was 58 when he was hired with the Bears. Hey, you had a great year as DC over with Baltimore, come on over and help our defense. Well, he just didn't scheme correctly. He used his talent incorrectly. Now Wade Phillips perhaps wouldn't make those same mistakes, but I'm just weary. I like the new innovative coaches. You're taking chances with some of them, obviously, but I guys like Rex Ryan and by the way, Stephen Nagishi says this, and I heard this morning on the ESPN show this morning. Rex Ryan called Nagy out on ESPN this morning.
He did.
Yeah,
I saw it.
Okay. Do you remember exactly what he said? I mean, he dragged him through the dirt.
Yeah, he said, I don't like this fucking guy because he always puts it off on everybody else, and he should look himself in the mirror and see that he's had, I think they had the stat of how many games. It was like more than half of the games that Nagy has been coach, the Bears have only scored one touchdown in more than half of his games.
Yeah.
It's 18 out of 50.
Wow.
Either way, I think, again, I was just giving like Rex or Bob Ryan as an example. My point with them is someone that you can immediately identify as, and your point's well taken with Pagano.
Mm-hmm.
I thought at the time, Pagano, I just had this envision of him coming from the Ravens and being aggressive, and he just wasn't aggressive. So you remember what he said in his presser? He was like, Khalil Mack dropping back in pass coverage, not in my defense. And it's like, yeah, that's who I wanted. But yeah, we need a guy, because Nagy and them are more like trying to be your brother-in-law and be your pal on offense. You need a guy that's got to balance that out, that's got some fucking fire and some passion, and that can light these guys up, because I just think that the defense was fucking lazy. And just, they read their own press clippings. They thought they were great, and they didn't do anything this year other than the Tampa Bay game. And they did okay in the first half. Like I said, I got to give them credit, holding New Orleans to 7.
But did they, or did Drew Brees just play that poorly in the first half?
Hey, when you're missing your best corner.
You're missing Roquan Smith, one of the best 5 defensive players in all of football.
Right. Well, I'm just saying you're playing those two guys in nickel and the other corner opposite Fuller that aren't exactly, you're talking low round draft picks here. So that's what I'm saying. I thought they did the best they could in that first half, holding them to 7 points. And like you said, Roquan, that's even more. But to miss Jalen Johnson, and I'm not a big fan of Buster Screen, but you have a huge drop off with Shelley, and although I would have probably played Shelley over Buster, but that's just me. But and Vildor in comparison with Jalen Johnson. So all things considered, the defense I thought did well in the first half, but the second half is man. The same thing we saw all year, where they were allowing other teams to go on these drives that take up 8 and 9 minutes of a quarter. When you just can't get off the field, and every time the other team has a 3rd down and 12 or more, you better believe we're giving it up.
Yeah.
The Bears are better on 4th and 1 than they are 3rd and 20.
Yeah, they are. That is true. I'm throwing up some video clips of the defense and their performance in the first half against Drew Brees. So if you're following us on our YouTube, you can see this. The defense had some issues with tackling, but they continually stopped for almost every big third down situation that Brees had against the Bears defense. The Bears defense got the job done. And so that's a tribute. When you're down, what was it, 7-3 at the half? That's pretty unbelievable. The big problem is that the Bears offense were just a 3rd down flop. They failed on their first 9 third down attempts. And so you can't do that. It doesn't only impact the score, it also impacts the defense, and they get demoralized out there when they start thinking, holy shit, I'm not even going to think about tackling now because we got to get the ball back. We got to score our own touchdowns.
I'm not buying that. I have to jump in.
Okay, please.
Because there were so many times this year, especially at the end of the run, at the end of the season, when the defense was doing literally nothing.
No.
The offense, like against Green Bay, for example, drove straight down the field, first possession, 7-0 Bears. And just come out and get a stop. And why they do, they let Green Bay immediately go straight back down the field. There were a lot of times in this season with the Bears, like the time of possession against Green Bay, they almost had 37 minutes they had the ball.
Mm-hmm.
And the defense still gave up all those points. Is what I'm saying. Like, everyone always says, the defense is getting tired because of that. Big fuck that, man. There are times to start the second half, they just come out of halftime, or to start the game, they're giving up 12 and 13 play drives. Some of this is on them.
Mm-hmm.
You can't always blame Trubisky for it. Not you. I just meant in general.
Mm-hmm.
You can't always blame Mitch or the offense or even Foles to say, for the defensive struggles. At some point, they have to own that themselves.
No, I agree with you, and I bet Steven does too. There's definitely plenty of blame to go around in the defense, and somebody just put up in the chat room that this defense is getting old, and that is for sure. What was it? 7 of the 11 starters on defense were over the age of 30, and Khalil Mack is going to be 30 next season. So this defense needs some help in a huge way. They got to get younger. I'm really worried about Danny Trevathan coming back next season. He's no longer starting material. We saw with the injuries that the inside linebacker position doesn't have depth. Josh Woods came in and looked terrible against Green Bay, and then
Te'o played okay though.
He did, but he's not a long-term answer. Even as a reserve, you need somebody who can fly at that inside linebacker position, who can run from the numbers and left and right, and he's not that guy, but he is a serviceable, emergency player. He didn't do poorly, but I think against a lot of teams, they'll figure him out. There's a reason why 2 teams have cut him and he's out there available, and the Bears had to pick him up because of the depth issues that they've had.
Well, I feel more comfortable with him,
Mm-hmm.
and then Joel, Iggy.
Buniwe.
Yeah, I knew I was going to fuck it up. Yeah, that gentleman and Josh Woods, I felt like, and that's why I was like, man, they activated Te'o. I bet you that he plays over Iggy, and you didn't think it would happen.
I thought you were nuts. I thought you were nuts, but apparently you're not as nutty as I think you are.
Well, I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, is to say that I think he's a good reserve, is what I'm saying. If he would be with the Bears in 2021 as your Nick Kwiatkowski kind of coming off the bench, and I don't know if he's as rugged as Kwiatkowski, but because I don't know how great a tackler he is what I'm saying. Kwiatkowski, that was his strong suit, not necessarily his speed, but at least he could come in and give you some heart. If Te'o could do that, then he could be a good reserve.
The one thing about Kwiatkowski, just real quick, Zim, and then you can jump in, is Kwiatkowski has made up for his lack of speed with good quickness, and he's just a film study machine, and so he anticipates a lot of plays really well. And so he surprised me in that final season with the Bears, because I knew of his athletic mediocrity, but boy, he played well and deserved that contract he got with the Raiders, and had a so-so season with him. But everybody in Oakland, or Las Vegas, feels like he's going to be a really good linebacker for years to come. I'm sorry, Zim, go ahead.
No, it's fine. Because I completely agree with what you had to say there. And it does feel like the Danny Trevathan move, I don't want to say it was desperate, but it seemed like they really had to choose. And it was like, do we keep people happy, or do we get better for the future? And it seems like they decided to keep people happy. But going back to Manti Te'o, he reminded me a lot in that game of what we used to see out of John Timu when he was the number 3 backer on that team. He's always around the ball. He might not be the fastest, or he was always there when you needed him to be there.
I think that's a really good comparison. It really is. He is a lot like Timu. And is Timu out of the league right now? I know he was bouncing around a little bit, but I'm not sure he's in the NFL anymore.
I can't disagree with the Timu comparison, although I can say that he was probably an undrafted rookie versus Te'o was a first rounder, right?
No, second rounder, I believe, with the Chargers.
Well, either way, I mean, on paper, Te'o's supposed to have more skill than John Timu, but that's a credit to Timu that he could even get that comparison and a jab at Te'o for his lack of ability, sort of being a bust, is what I'm saying, for him to be compared to a guy like John Timu. But it's a fair comparison for sure.
John Timu is currently coaching at Washington or Washington State.
That's what I had heard. Yeah, he moved to a coaching job.
Te'o was a round 2 pick, but he was also a Heisman finalist, is something that you kind of have to keep in mind too, which is something really weird to think about. Somebody who was a Heisman finalist has fallen off this badly in their career.
He has a pretend Heisman trophy in his cabinet.
Oh, I knew we were going to bring this catfishing shit up.
I had to. Come on. That was too easy.
The poor guy fell in love with someone from the internet, and it was probably a guy.
Definitely, it was a guy, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, man. All right. What else you guys want to talk about? What's on your mind?
It's only 10:21, so I've got another hour to give you. If you
nice.
want.
Well, let's,
Dan, I know you've got this love for commentators, analysts, whatever you want to call them, that are washed up quarterbacks. And I've got involving the most washed up one of them all. I don't know if he's the most, but you remember Sage Rosenfeld?
Oh, yes, I do.
Did you hear his little rant that he had? I think it was earlier today on 670.
No, I did not. Please fill me in.
So he went on literally like this 7-minute rant about the offensive coaching in the playoff game for the Bears and how basically you didn't give your team a chance. And it's something that I've kind of been on since the first half of that game, that I was glad to see that somebody who actually knows something about the game saw as well. And that's basically just like, what kind of game plan was that? What the hell did Nagy actually think he was going to accomplish? Like, that game plan felt like he knew his job was safe. And maybe that's just me, but Sage Rosenfeld's really laid into him on that one. And I appreciated it. And I don't know if there's any way we can find that audio or not, or if you just have to listen to it on your own time, but I think you'd appreciate it.
The reason I just want to clarify, the reason that I get on some of these guys, and I can't, which one is the one that's got the high pitched voice? It's either Tony Graziano or Dan Orlovsky. It's one of them where they almost sound like their voice is changing from puberty.
I think it's Orlovsky sounds that way. Yeah.
Yeah. So he's the one, like, he was, I heard him criticizing the game plan going into for the Saints wild card game. And he was talking about, the quarterback can't do this and the quarterback can't do that. And the quarterback's not like, dude, Mitchell Trubisky can throw left-handed better than you played. And he's making it sound like he's such a fucking expert. He's some offensive guru, and he would know what to do, and he could play, he could do it. I mean, dude, you had a chance. Like don't tell me Trubisky sucks when you were, to put it in wrestling terms, a complete and fucking total jobber. You fucking sucked. So it's like Chris Sims, Graziano, Sage Rosenfels, Dan Orlovsky. That's why, like, Sean Salisbury, you don't hear from him anymore, but when he worked at ESPN, he was always so arrogant and pointing out everybody's flaws. And I'm like, well, dude, to use a cliche, we all live in a glass house here, and you fucking sucked. You were horrible. How can you point out everyone else's flaws when you were so goddamn terrible? But okay, that's the end. I'm just trying to clarify my rant on the reason I don't like all these backup quarterbacks.
No,
not even backups, like third string quarterbacks.
Well, how many teams did Sage Rosenfeld play for? I mean, to my recollection, at least 4. And I only started paying attention to football in 2005. So how many teams before that?
He had.
I just
he played
in Washington.
He played with Washington, Miami, Houston,
right?
and then Minnesota, Giants, and then went back to Miami, and then back to Minnesota. So he moved around a lot. He had his bags packed a lot. Jeremy wants to know, why do quarterback failures get these broadcasting jobs? Guys like Brady Quinn and Dan Orlovsky.
Brady Quinn's another good one. That's a good one.
All he does is fun everybody everywhere.
Yeah, what's a Hasselbeck too? Not the one that had success in the NFL. Tim,
My
right?
theory on these guys is because they made so little money actually playing quarterback that they need to do something with that they playing the game. And this is a good way to get the bills paid.
Well, I'm not hating them for trying to get a gig. I give them, that's fine. But and they're better than I could have played. There's 100 times better. Like I in 0 out of 100, games could outplay Dan Orlovsky. I'm just saying, I don't pretend to be Joe Montana the way he does, or they go on there telling me like they know everything. Like, dude, you fucking had a chance and you sucked. Like I said, when I see them, I'm like, God, where's Jonathan Quinn right now or Steve Stenstrom to tell me what's wrong with the Bears? Who else from the back? Where's Will Fuhrer when I need him?
Good old left-handed Will Fuhrer.
From Virginia Tech. You talk about that's the eye. Like he started Ditka's last game. And if anything, like if coach was on here, I'd be like, that should have been like your sign. Like, I might get fired. I'm playing this kid. Like, you shouldn't go with Will Fuhrer ever. There's only been like 2 left-handed quarterbacks worth of fuck ever. Ken Stabler and Steve Young.
By the way, M. Desai in the chat room says you should.
Esiason.
M. Desai in the chat room says that you should add Chris Sims to that list of failed quarterbacks who are now broadcasting.
I agree, and he's got a fucking attitude as well. Like he's just so fucking conceited, and a lot of people don't like Phil, but like I've told you before, people forget at least Phil was there for so long and overcame the people saying he was a bust for Morehead State. And all he did was get hurt. And he's just stuck around, and he led them to the Super Bowl. And it was like 22 of 25 in the Super Bowl. And then basically led them to a second Super Bowl, but he got hurt at the end of the year. And then Hostetler scooped it up and ran with the ball at the end there. But I'm just saying, Phil Sims was a lot better quarterback than people give him credit for historically.
Oh, yeah.
And if you don't like him as an analyst, at least he's got credibility to me. And I don't think, the only thing I could say good about Chris is he played in a game, was hurt, and didn't know that his spleen he had to get his spleen removed. Like he took a hit. He got hit so hard that it fucked up his spleen. So, I mean, he's got some balls. I'll give him that. He's tough, but he didn't amount to anything. And, whatever. I digress.
Jeremy has a great question, and I think we really don't have an answer for this right now. We're going to do some studying. We have to see how this free agent list comes down and what the salary cap is going to be. But he would love for you guys to talk about realistic free agent additions, because he says, Jeremy says, I seriously need some hope with this team. And there's going to be some really good free agents out there available. But the question right now is that the Bears have 33 players signed for the 2021 season. So they don't even have the full roster signed for next season. And they are already over the projected salary cap. So we have to see what the NFL is going to do with the salary cap. Are they going to raise it? Are they going to figure out some kind of formula so that these teams, because the majority of the teams are at that point where they're either at the salary cap already and they don't have a full roster, or are over it. And so there might have to be some creative accounting done so that teams can fill out rosters and the free agents can get paid. So I think there's going to be a great big battle between the players union and the owners to figure things out. But there's guys like, first of all, I would love it if they re-signed Allen Robinson. Don't you guys think that Darnell Mooney and Allen Robinson will be a great pair for the next 3 to 5 years together?
No.
Really? Why?
I'm with Zimmerman.
Why?
If wasn't the head, if Nagy wasn't the head coach, I would absolutely say that they're a great combo. Problem is, we've got this guy still fucking here.
I'm not slamming Allen Robinson.
Mm-hmm.
Allen Robinson was the best wide receiver we've had during all 3 seasons that he was here. On the team, I mean. He was the best wide receiver the Bears had. And we got into this early in the season before week 1 when I was telling you, I was like, look, I like him, but he's not Hopkins. He's not Hopkins. So, again, that goes to my point is reportedly Allen Robinson wanted $20 million a year.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's too much given the fact that the cap's coming down for a guy that is solid. He's solid, but he's more or less a possession kind of receiver. So, like the Bears offered him $15 million, I think that was fair. Or even if you give him 16.5, that's fair. But to pay him $20 million or to franchise him, I don't want to do that. I don't want to see him walk. I really don't. I wish he was still here, but at a $20 million price tag, there's too many problems elsewhere. And how many people are going to get cut because this problem with the cap isn't just the Chicago Bears. Every team is going to be facing similar dilemmas.
Mm-hmm.
So who knows what quality player is going to get released that we'll have a chance to jump on. I'm not saying that it's going to be better than A-Rob, but I'm just saying if the price is right, I say bring him back. But for $20 million a year, that's a little steep right now to me.
I agree that $20 million is too much, but in 2022, $20 million is not a lot. So if they can sign A-Rob to a backloaded deal where next season he comes in at a cap-friendly deal and then it escalates over the years, because there's no doubt in my mind that this guy is good for 100 receptions every year. If he had a better quarterback, he would, I think, have more touchdowns than he has scored with the Chicago Bears. The guy has better than decent hands. I know we all got down on him for some of those jump balls that he didn't come down with, but for the most part, I mean, he has made some gorgeous football catches, diving catches,
good footwork too. Really good footwork.
Excellent footwork. He doesn't have the speed to create separation, but his size, he knows how to box defenders out. So he kind of plays that basketball forward type. And so he can get positioning on players because he knows how to do that with his body. The results are there, guys. It's 200 receptions over the last 2 seasons. And arguably with an offensive line that is below average and a quarterback that is at best average. And I think we can all agree production-wise has been below average. I don't know. I like the guy a lot, and I would love for him and Darnell Mooney to be teamed together for the next 2 or 3 years. And I think that Matt Nagy isn't the hindrance to those 2 guys performing well. I mean, remember, Darnell Mooney, this was his rookie year. I think you give him another year working with A-Rob, that the 2 of them, between the 2 of them, they could get like about 175 receptions next season. I'm not convincing anybody.
No, it's not that you're, again, I can't, when I hear what you're saying, I could buy into it. Mm-hmm. I just feel like he wants to get paid like a top 5 or top 10 wide receiver. And I don't think he is. I think he is a top 15 wide receiver. And I think he was the best wide receiver the Bears have had since Brandon Marshall.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, his statistics are phenomenal. He had the bonehead play against Detroit that I'm sure even he would criticize.
Absolutely. He did. Yeah.
Yeah. But beyond that, I mean, he's done everything right. And I have no problem with Allen Robinson being re-signed as a Bears fan. If he was re-signed tomorrow, I would think, oh, that's cool. I mean, he's dependable, he's reliable, he's there, but if you're telling me that the salary cap is a big issue and we've got 2 players that we obviously cannot move in Quinn and Mack, although with the right defensive coordinator, I think both of them could return to at least something more formidable than what we've seen the last 2 years. Or Quinn wasn't here in 8 or 19, but I think Khalil Mack could have a resurgence under the right scheme. And the same could be said for Robert Quinn. But either way, both guys are still here. with those massive contracts. And I don't know if you want to give Allen Robinson said massive contract because you're going to need probably a left tackle, probably a right tackle, and a fucking quarterback.
Zim, you want to add anything before we pick a new topic?
I'm absolutely with Dan on that bit of it. Is that like, why are we worrying about a receiver when we don't even have a quarterback right now?
Well, let me ask you another one on wide receiver. Emotions are on high, so I know that we could say this emotionally and say, "Oh yeah," but pretend it's a month away from the game and it's, we've had time to soothe or to relax from it. Would you move on from Anthony Miller?
Yes.
I think so too. I do too.
Anthony Miller has been the most overhyped and overrated player on this team for 3 years running.
Mm-hmm.
Or Eddie Jackson maybe, but yeah, Anthony Miller's
no, because see, here's my disagreement with that is just that every offseason, everybody's like, who's your breakout player? Who's your breakout player? Who's your breakout? Ever since his rookie year, I keep hearing Anthony Miller. What the hell has that guy done other than throw a punch and get thrown out of a couple games?
Well, he caught the just to be fair, I agree with your point. But just to play devil's advocate, he did catch the game-winning touchdown in Atlanta and Detroit this year. But that's it.
You touched it before that as well. I mean, he caught a game winner for everyone that he dropped first 5 weeks of the season.
No, I agree with you. I don't know if they would just cut him because he was a second-round pick, but
he was second-round picks.
Yeah, maybe you trade him to just try to get draft capital.
Now I'm just getting pissed off thinking that
they traded up for him.
Yes, they traded their second-round pick from the next year too. What was he 20? Yeah, he was the same year as Mitch, so the 2017 draft. So his contract should be up, right?
I think he was an 18.
Was he 18?
I think he was an 18. Yeah, because
asshole for another year.
Yeah, I think he's still back, and I was thinking, man, I would cut ties with him, and definitely Javon Wims. I don't know why we have this fucking loyalty to Wims. I mean, I don't know if Wims could ever recover from that drop anyway. You combine that with, he had 6 catches in the regular season. Why are we Wims is our guy? What has he done to deserve that? You still don't know what you have with Ridley, and his brother's got such good pedigree. I know for every Walter Payton, there's an Eddie Payton, but still, fuck, man, you have to think this guy could probably play, and we don't know. We don't know what we have.
What do you guys think are the top off-season priorities in terms of position acquisition? Clearly, quarterback is one of them, but outside
backup running back is a top-notch backup running back.
So you are not satisfied with an Artavius Pierce, a Tariq Cohen, and David Montgomery backfield, correct?
If Cleveland wins in Kansas City this week, it's going to be because they've got Chubb and the guy that had all that trouble with the Chiefs. What's his name?
Kareem Hunt.
Yeah, Kareem Hunt. So there you go. It's a two-headed monster coming at you. Yeah, I think the Bears need that because when Montgomery goes down, fuck Ryan. I don't want to shit on Ryan Nall, but God, you saw what happened to him when he got his playoff carry. And Patterson is a good return man, and I don't know if I want to see him in the backfield again. He's a free agent too, so he may be gone.
Mm-hmm.
But I definitely not. I don't mean to jump on your question, but I think you need a really good because I think Montgomery has shown enough to where you can say he's our number one back. I think he's proven that this year, and you got to solidify the line the best that you can, probably with 2 new tackles.
Well, you got to figure Massey's gone, almost guaranteed. Leno, I can see go both ways because for what you're paying him, you get what he gives you. He gets
stability.
Yeah.
He's there every week.
Paid below league average, and he performs right around there. But Massey's old. He didn't perform when he was healthy. Now he's hurt. It's time to cut ties, get the cap space for that. So yes, I agree. We absolutely need to find a somewhere.
And wasn't Effetti a 1-year deal too?
Effetti was a 1-year league minimum. He's going to want more than that this year.
So you have no right tackle now because Massey's going to be gone. Fetty's gone. So you need a starting right tackle.
They still have
maybe a left tackle. Maybe.
Don't they still have Coward under contract?
Oh, fuck me. That's the guy I want to see released. It's not because he's a bad guy. He's not a bad guy. Maybe they can hire him as an analyst too to go. Chris Sims and Rashad Coward. breaking down what's wrong with the Bears. Next.
Here are some of the comments in the chat room. Probably the best one is who was it that said that we need a president, a general manager, and a coach? Pass rush, O-line, quarterback, receiver, offensive tackle, quarterback, offensive lineman, wide receiver, head coach, quarterback, inside linebacker. So it goes on and on. This team really has a hell of a lot of needs. There's no doubt about it. And so to prioritize them, it is clear. You need, first of all, you need a head coach who's going to instill real discipline on these players. I mean, what do you guys think about this whole thing that Matt Nagy spent time talking to Anthony Miller this week, 15 minutes talking to him about, don't let that guy get into your head, and then boom, punches him. And then right before that series, Mike Fury, the wide receivers coach, talked to Miller about it too, because he sensed that something was going on. So what do you guys think about this? The lack of discipline on the part of the Chicago Bears is, I think, one of the biggest problems with the team.
I agree that go ahead, Zim. My bad.
Well, I was going to add to that by saying, did you see the interaction that Miller had on the sidelines with Nagy after he got thrown out of the game?
Yeah.
Yeah. Cause I mean, that right there tells me his ass needs to be cut. Like he practically headbutted his head coach, and you don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that speaks a lot to Nagy's ability to discipline these guys. He clearly doesn't have a handle on some of these players. The team didn't fall apart, and you give him credit for that. But I mean, some of these guys just clearly don't respect him. They don't give a shit what he's got to say.
I agree with you 100%. That's where I was going. The thing with Wims and now Anthony Miller, because they think that they can do what they want, and there's no sense of accountability. There's not going to be any significant punishment. And again, I know Aldo's not a huge Ditka fan, but we both know that wouldn't have flown. If Ditka was here, that guy would have been cut.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I mean, and winning fixes everything, right? But what's the one thing Nagy can't seem to figure out how to do consistently?
Mm-hmm.
It almost feels like these guys wouldn't be an issue. They wouldn't be on Twitter and Instagram liking shit publicly for other people to see. They wouldn't be disrespecting their coach on national television. They wouldn't be punching other players on the field if you could find a way to get more production out of them.
Jeremy asked, what do you guys think Nagy was telling Miller when they were embracing each other on the sideline and after Miller got ejected?
I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed.
Mm-hmm. Now go take your helmet and go to the locker room and sit there like a good little boy. I love you.
That's about.
I love you.
If we can come back and win, I want you to be in Club Dub so we can go boom.
I'm gonna miss you next season, buddy.
Yeah, that's what he should. I can tell you what I would have said. I would have said, Anthony, we talked about this week. Mike Fury just talked about it a few minutes ago, and then you go out there and you let me down, you let the team down, you let your family down. I want you to go into the locker room, start packing your things, and find a way to get back to the airport or hotel, wherever we're headed to. I don't want to see you. I don't want to talk to you until Monday morning. Now get the fuck out of my sight. That's what I would have told.
Lawrence Holmes on Friday, I think it was Friday, maybe Thursday, late last week, he had the Saints beat writer on.
Mm-hmm.
Can't remember his name, but the guy had been in New Orleans going back, he had grown up in New Orleans, so he had watched them since their first year in their inception and had been covering them since like the late 80s. So the guy's been around the Saints his whole fucking life.
Mm-hmm.
And they were talking about this guy, Gardner, whatever his fucking name is, the guy that starts all the shit in the secondary there. And he said, now, to be fair, I would really strongly probably hate him if he was on another team. But he gave an example of why he's such a strong asset for the Saints. And I didn't know this because I don't watch the Saints enough. But there was a game where they were playing Atlanta, and he said it came down to a last-ditch play, like almost a Hail Mary, and Calvin Ridley was open, and Matt Ryan threw him the ball. but they had been going back and forth all day, and Ridley wasn't even looking for the ball. He just took a cheap shot at the Gardner guy. I want to call him Gardner Minshew. Whatever. The guy in the secondary for the Saints.
Yeah.
He was in Calvin Ridley's head so much that if Ridley turned his head around, he could have caught a game-winning touchdown. But instead, he wanted to push the guy from the Saints and take a gratuitous little shot at him and didn't even look for the ball. He's like, there's something to be said about that. If you have a guy on your team that can take another guy's star wide receiver completely fucking out of the game, other than Julio, but Ridley's their number 2. But he said you can just neutralize him to the point where he's open. He's the primary receiver on a route, and the ball is thrown to him, and he's not even looking for it. He said that's why I love him. That's why Sean Payton loves him. So they encourage him to do this shit.
Oh, of course. It's such a unique trait to have in the NFL. Like you see it in hockey all the time. Occasionally there's a baseball player who'll get really under, like a catcher who just babbles behind the plate and gets under the batter's skin. But in football, I feel like we don't see it. And, like it or not, shit talking is a part of sports. And the fact that this guy does it so well is, you're absolutely right. It's such an asset. It's an art form.
For them just to take people out of their entire mental state of even catching a game-winning touchdown. So, yeah, I thought, and again, this is before Anthony Miller got ejected, obviously. I heard it, I think on Saturday I was listening to it. I was shaving because I just wanted, something just to break that monotony. And I was like, God, that's pretty good. Like I could see why the Saints would like him. And then, of course, he came into play in the postseason game too. So.
But I can't think of anybody else in the NFL, since I've been paying attention at least, who's had that ability to take a player out of the game verbally like that. They always talk about Phillip Rivers being such a good smack talker, but I mean, it's not like he really throws anybody off his game doing it.
Future Chicago Bear, Phillip Rivers? Question mark?
Start.
Well, that's a good question because
I advocated it, but they say he's done with the Colts.
That's right. No. He is definitely not going back to Indianapolis. And Estoya72 in the chat room says if the Bears were to trade for a quarterback, given we don't have a chance in the draft at our current position to draft one of the top quarterbacks, which contracts players would you package together for Dak or Watson, since we were tight on cap room? So yeah, if you're going to go after a Dak, Dak, by the way, is a free agent.
Mac if you're going to go after somebody like that,
exactly.
Contract for contract.
Exactly. You're going to have to package, like an Akeem Hicks and the Khalil Mack kind of thing to get a Deshaun Watson. Now, Dak Prescott is a free agent, so you can try to acquire him that way, but then you're going to have to create cap space to sign a Dak Prescott who is asking for $30+ million. Other free agent quarterbacks, Cam Newton, who was a big bargain for the Patriots. Andy Dalton is scheduled to be a free agent. Jacoby Brissett is scheduled to be a free agent. Jameis Winston is scheduled to be a free agent.
I think they're going to bring him back if Breeze retires, though.
That's what was reported during the game, that Sean Payton said that he'd like to bring Jameis Winston back and have him and Taysom Hill be the kind of the 1-2 quarterback punch over there. So Winston probably won't be available as a free agent.
Fitzpatrick, I think he's available.
He would be available. And then potential trades, Carson Wentz, I heard David Kaplan, and who I immensely respect, and he's great at what he does. Absolutely.
But one of the things that he shot down and just shit on, I think if for some reason the Lions cut Stafford, I would be all over that. I mean, you say, oh, he's 35, but fuck, man, quarterbacks, can play to 40, 42, 43 now. And I know he had a significant back injury in 2019, but if for some reason Detroit really is going to move on from Stafford, now maybe they would trade him. And I asked you that on the show once. It's like, what if we traded Mac straight up for Stafford? And it's not necessarily unthinkable because the Redskins picked up Donovan McNabb in a trade from the Eagles. So it has happened before, but probably unlikely. But I think if you could get Stafford, man, I would be all over that for like 2 years and draft you a quarterback.
I just can't see it.
Why?
Maybe it's just because he's a division rival, but it's just like, what has Stafford ever done? You don't win because of Stafford.
Well, he's taken Detroit to the playoffs like 3 times, and arguably they were cheated in Dallas that year. I think it was 2014, and they should have won. So again, he's got skill. He's got an arm. I think he's a good player myself. And as much as I love Jay Cutler, statistically, Stafford has had a better career than even Cutler.
Okay, but who did Stafford have catching the ball from him for most of those years? You know, he had Calvin Johnson out there where it was literally fuck it and chuck it, and Calvin's going to come down with it. Like, to me, it's just, he's one of the most unimpressive big yardage quarterbacks I think I've ever watched, because it's just 90% of what he does is in garbage time. And the stuff that he does that isn't in garbage time, it's all been with Calvin Johnson.
It's all been with some shitty coaches in Detroit too, though. Let's be honest.
Well, not only shitty coaches, but shitty offensive lines and shitty running backs. I mean, that team has never had a running back until they drafted this kid from, who was he from? Ohio State?
Oklahoma State.
Oklahoma State. Thank you. Well, yeah, back then, but he has not been surrounded with quality people other than Calvin Johnson and maybe another receiver or two over time. Kenny Galladay is an ascending star in the NFL, but he was injured most of the season. Marvin Jones is a better than average quarterback, but certainly not a star. And somebody in the chat room says that Matthew Stafford finds ways to lose, but that's not really true. Matthew Stafford, let me look this up real quick here. Matthew Stafford is, since 1960, Matthew Stafford is 7th in terms of fourth quarter comebacks. Now, here are the players above him: Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, Drew Brees, Ben Roethlisberger, Johnny Unitas, Dan Marino, and he's tied with John Elway for fourth quarter comebacks. Behind them.
Why is that? Why is that? Because the Lions are always behind. So every time they win, he's got to do something Superman for them to win.
Right. Well, I mean, we can analyze why any of these teams, quarterbacks, have had to come back, and you could probably maybe point to a certain percentage, maybe high, that it was their fault that they fell behind. But nonetheless, he's done it. You know,
no, I was agreeing with you.
Oh, I see what
you're saying. It takes a Herculean effort for them to win a game.
Right. So I don't know. I like Matt Stafford, and if he was available and we can get him at a salary cap friendly kind of situation, I would love to see him here for the next 2 or 3 years.
Here's another team that Elijah Zelonki just brought up in the chat room, is that Stafford's played in a dome his whole career.
Mm-hmm.
You know, how's he going to do in the Chicago weather?
I see that comeback a few weeks ago in the cold.
How cold was it?
It was cold. I mean, it was cold. I mean, everyone, what was it, like 30?
30. That's not even cold for Chicago. That's an average winter day in Chicago. Like,
I'm just saying, I mean, come on, Stafford, you might not like him. That's not to say that he's going to be like, oh, I'm so intimidated by the cold, I can't go there. I mean,
just don't trust him. I don't trust him for whatever reason.
Well, you could be completely right to get him, and then you're like, say, see, I told you. But I always thought he's kind of underrated, even though he's the first pick in the draft. I thought, considering that he's been with all these bad teams in Detroit, that he's a better player than maybe he gets credit for. That's the way I always viewed him.
Mm-hmm.
I get it. I can't see it. I just can't see it with him. It's just so many of his stats just feel hollow and empty, and the way he plays the game, it just feels like he's going through the motions.
Get out!
Like
I don't see that at all.
That's the Bears defense to me.
I don't see that at all with Matt Stafford. I see one of the most passionate football players in the NFL. I mean, he plays hard. I think he is frustrated with what's happened in Detroit. I think he was not a fan of Matt Patricia, and he was not a fan of Caldwell, the coach before him. I think he's just kind of fed up with the whole Detroit situation, and who can blame him? Just like Deshaun Watson is fed up with the Houston situation, and just like Mitch Trubisky is fed up with the Bears situation because of Nagy, and on it goes. But to me, did you recall that first his rookie season when Matt Stafford was mic'd up and he had got injured, but he stayed in the game and he led this fourth quarter comeback, and you were hearing him, fighting through the pain and really rallying his team. That to me left an indelible impression about what a competitor he is. And I think that he would have had more success in the NFL with a better coach and a general manager that would have got him an offensive line. I mean, that guy had been beat up, sacked multiple times. And some of it is his fault because he tends to hold on to the ball a little longer than coaches might like. But he's never had a good offensive line. He's never had a good running back. He's had good receivers, like I said earlier. But man, oh man, I like the guy. I wouldn't mind seeing him.
I think he's very similar to Cutler in the sense that his disposition is better than Cutler's. And his statistics are better than Jay's, but his overall, his ability kind of reminds me of Cutler in terms of his style of play.
Somebody, Salvatoris 1111 says, if Nick Foles is the starter next year, fuck this. I'm watching bowling. What do you guys think? Because there is a very strong possibility that Nick Foles is your starting quarterback, that they draft somebody and they're kind of forced almost to have Nick Foles as that bridge quarterback. What do you guys think about that?
If Foles is starting, you're going to have your backup ready because he never completes an entire season.
That is true. That is true.
I think if you have a functional line and a coach that knows what the fuck he's doing, then Foles could be okay. I mean, look, he's Super Bowl MVP. He outdueled Tom Brady, and you can't take that away from him. But under Matt Nagy, I don't know. I definitely wouldn't be watching bowling though, but I'm going to be watching the games, hopefully, unless I get incapacitated or something.
Oh yeah,
I'm going to be watching, and if he's the quarterback, I'm going to be rooting for him. But I don't feel super confident about him either. Although, again, I think if he's in the right scheme with the right coach, he could be fine. He's proven that.
Zim,
I just don't think that's with the Bears.
I think Salvatoris is going to be watching for him. So I have full faith in this team to go out and get a better quarterback than what they've done. I think they're going to take shots and miss on a lot of free agents, just like they did last year. And they're going to end up with Nick Foles starting and Tyler Bray as his backup because Pace refuses to draft quarterbacks unless they're Mitch Trubisky.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just I lost my train of thought on that one.
I really don't want Tyler Bray as the backup.
I'm so caught up in the idea of Tyler as Nick Foles as our quarterback. I can't even get his name right. I'm so.
Well, here's something, and I think I mentioned this in last week's show, that this was 3 weeks ago. Matt Nagy was answering questions about, what's going on with Mitch Trubisky's improved play and so forth. And he said, well, first of all, it starts with the people around him playing better. And the offensive line has been playing much better since he returned. And frankly, any quarterback would play better with an offensive line. And I took that as a direct hint that if Nick Foles were healthy and playing behind this improved offensive line, Nick Foles would be doing a better job because he knows how to run my offense. Because that's how Matt Nagy is. He desperately wants to prove that, number one, he could call plays in the NFL, and number two, that his offense, the scheme that he's come up with based on his experiences with other NFL coaches, is outstanding and can win in the NFL. That's the biggest concern. Is not Nick Foles or who the hell is playing quarterbacks. Is this egomaniac who is the head coach of the Chicago Bears.
I agree. Like I've told you so many times, I honestly feel like he defines and exemplifies a narcissist.
Mm-hmm.
He honestly does not think anything is his fault ever. But as soon as Mitch starts playing well, the first thing Nagy was like, well, give credit to the coaches. Give credit to the coaches. It's just like he's saying, give me credit.
Mm-hmm.
But, when they lose, he's never saying, oh, this is on me. And I think he was forced to give up the play calling the time that he did. And I am buying into the conspiracy theory that he was calling the plays against Green Bay and in the New Orleans. I really believe it because everything they'd been doing right, suddenly they weren't doing anymore.
That's something Rosenfeld into as well.
Well, give Rosenfeld credit for something, then, damn it.
Allen Robinson was asked that question in today's press
He
conference.
said he didn't know on ESPN Radio. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that's right. It was on ESPN that he said that. He said, I frankly don't know, which kind of almost led you to believe that he did know and he just didn't want to say.
That's exactly what I thought. I was like, man, he's just he's playing his cards because he knows he could be back here and doesn't want to burn, the bridge down.
Mm-hmm. Alex Sims wants to know, what young quarterback would we want to trade for? For example, Jalen Hurts, Drew Lock, Sam Darnold, etc. First of all, I got to tell you, I wanted the Chicago Bears to draft Jalen Hurts in the second round. They had 2 second-round draft picks. I thought it was time. Let's fill the pipeline with a young quarterback, and I think Jalen Hurts was a great second-round pick. They chose not to draft Jalen Hurts, and I think he's got a future in this NFL based on the handful of games that he played with the Eagles. What do you guys think about what you saw out of Jalen Hurts?
I was begging for Jalen Hurts in the draft. I remember being at work, and at that point in time, I was at a facility where I wasn't allowed to have my phone on the floor, and I snuck my phone out onto the floor for that second round pick because I knew that Jalen was there. God, Jalen Hurts, sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Jalen Hurts was there, and they drafted Cole Kmet, and I just went, man, go figure. That's such a Bears move.
I don't think you're going to get him, though, because Philly invested a second-round pick in him, if I recall correctly.
That's correct.
And, and I think they're ready to move on from Wentz if someone could do it. And I don't want to trade for him. What if San Francisco would cut Garoppolo?
Absolutely not.
He's still young. He's done well. He took a team to the Super Bowl.
He's the same player as Mitch, but with a better head coach.
He gets more chicks than Mitch, too.
I'm saying he's a local guy. He did take a team. They were about to beat Kansas City in the Super Bowl. I don't know. I don't think Garoppolo is that bad. I mean, if anything, he's done more than Mitch. He beat Green Bay in the championship game.
Again, he's got a much, much better head coach. Kyle Shanahan is one of the next great head coaches in this league. And he understands how to work to his players' strengths. And so he did that with Garoppolo and made him look like this great player that I think it's all smoke and mirrors with him. I think it's all Shanahan's system that's making him look as good as he's looked.
What do you guys think of Gardner Minshew? And I just asked the question on Twitter and people were like, are you fucking stupid? I'm like, dude, I'm just asking the question. And so I'm going to ask the question and then I will share my opinion. Go ahead.
I told you once before, earlier in the season, I heard Gardner Minshew on the radio. Like, I don't know what the source was, and the context was he significantly thought, he and his agent thought that the Bears were trading for him in the offseason. He thought it was a done deal.
Really?
Like,
that's
I
right.
heard him
You mentioned
say
that, right?
He thought he was going to Chicago, and then they announced the Nick Foles trade. He thought it was going to be him. So he legitimately thought he was going to be a Bear this season. But what do I think about him? I mean, I haven't watched enough of his game to know. On the surface, my immediate reaction is to say, oh, no. But I'm just trying to be as objective as I can. I haven't watched a lot of Jaguar football.
Nobody has. Not even people in Jacksonville.
Exactly.
Zim, you got any thoughts on Gardner Minshew other than his porn mustache?
Yeah, he's got a hell of a personality, but that's all I really know about the guy. He can throw a football better than I can. So.
Here's what CBS.com, who wrote this? Let's see. Scrolling up. Oh, our buddy Jason LaCanfora. Jason LaCanfora wrote this about Gardner Minshew. As a 6th-round pick, thrust into a starting role midway through week 1, he somehow overcame a really bad Jaguars roster with a toxic locker room that was filled with players who wanted out and highlighted by an ugly holdout from their best young player, Jalen Ramsey. He started at 4-4 at one point. he showed me being Jason Lockenfora, not me, Aldo Gandia, just again, Jason Lockenfora. And while the Jags will not be good in 2021, so he wrote this months ago, either this kid has established himself as a potential long-term NFL starter. He is super smart and constantly learning. A trade for a good offensive coordinator would be a good thing for him. I think that there's, here's what I would say. Got to study the tape. Got to see how he performs on third downs. When you're studying a quarterback, I think that one of the first things that you do is, okay, how does he perform on third down? That's your money down for a quarterback. Does he complete passes? Is he accurate? How does he react to duress? How does he react to blitzing? Does he process? Does he make that look to the right, that look to the center, that look to the left? Is he seeing the whole field? And so I say I would do due diligence, take a look at how he has reacted to that. And people were saying, well, come on, Mike Glennon, he was benched for Mike Glennon. That's not necessarily true. The Jags were in total bust mold. They want Trevor Lawrence, and I want Trevor Lawrence. Everybody wants Trevor Lawrence, and they had a great opportunity to get him. So they benched the better of the two quarterbacks, Gardner Minshew. I think that at the very least, it's worth a look.
I got two more names for you real quick. And I can't disagree with what you said. Like I said, I'm open to that. I haven't watched enough Jaguar football to make a fair assessment. But what if Las Vegas would move on from Derek Carr, or a guy that Pace, if you recall, wanted to trade for and couldn't, Marcus Mariota? What if one of those guys were available? Not saying that's what I want to do. I'm asking your opinion. If for some reason Mariota or Carr were suddenly available, kind of like the Stafford scenario.
Go ahead, Zim, you go first.
I feel like we had the Carr discussion last offseason, if I remember right. I think he was one of the first guys that people thought the Bears were going after before Dalton and Foles popped up. And that's not to say that they wouldn't revisit that. It's just that's what I recall from last year. And I vaguely recall in those discussions being open to the idea, but at this point, I can honestly tell you, I think I saw one play from a Raiders game throughout the whole year, and that was Nick Kwiatkowski's leaping Superman interception. I don't think I've seen a single pass from Derek Carr in about 2.5 years at this point.
Man, that game with the Dolphins in Oakland, I keep calling them Oakland. Las Vegas was phenomenal on the Saturday where Fitzpatrick led the Dolphins back at the end.
Yeah.
Was incredible in week 16. It was probably the best regular season game I've seen all season.
I will say that from what I remember watching Derek Carr when he was younger, when I had a lot more time to be watching football and I was watching almost every game every week, I really liked what I saw from him when I was younger, and I kept thinking, man, if this guy was on a better team, man, if this guy had a better coach, man, if this, if that with him. So I feel like he's definitely a good player, and if Vegas, for whatever reason, would move on from him, I think he could do something with the Bears because he's just athletic enough to run this system that Nagy seems to want to run, but he's also a pocket passer from what I recall of him. Mariota, though, I absolutely would not want. I think we saw the best of Mariota when he took the Titans to the playoffs.
And beat Matt Nagy.
And aside from that, I mean, I never really was very impressed with him, even when he played at Oregon. And back then I was watching a lot of Pac-12 games as well. So the guy never stuck out to me as that elite guy, as the guy, I should say. He's never been the guy that I feel like you just put him out there and you say, Marcus, go do your thing. And he says, I got you. It's just, he's kind of a ho-hum, whatever kind of quarterback to me.
Well, Aldo, if you don't mind me shifting gears just a moment.
Please do.
Because it's 11:10 p.m. on my side, so I've got to go relatively soon. So hopefully you all can carry a longer show after I'm gone and give me something to listen to. But I'm just trying to get in my shit before it's time to go. Question to you all. Our punter, our place kicker, and our long snapper are all not under contract. And considering what we've done, since Robbie got released, I say we have to sign Cairo Santos. And again, I tell you 100% I was wrong about him. I was like, why are we signing this fucking guy? But you have to bring him back. I mean, he made 26 straight. And if you count the one in the playoffs, 27 straight.
Mhm.
You have to bring him back. And so even the long snapper, Scales, is not under contract. So, and we know Patrick Manley, is one of the best Bears of all time, apparently, for just being a long snapper. And I'm saying that facetiously. But considering how well the field goals worked this year, I would say we want Scales and Santos back, even if O'Donnell leaves, although I'd like to bring him back too because we did draft him. But I think bringing Santos back has got to be a priority.
I totally agree with you. I would put that as one of my highest priorities, but to do it in a way that it's a value signing. Don't do a panic signing and say, wow, we finally found the kicker. Let's give him $5 million a year. No,
I agree.
Yeah, you take them out to eat, you take them to a couple of strip bars, you make them feel really loved and so forth, and then you sign them for about $1 million a season. I'm exaggerating, but make it a team-friendly deal with bonuses. You make the
we saved your career, bro. You were bouncing around and everybody was cutting you.
Exactly.
And
so
I gave you the chance. So hometown discount, stay here.
Hopefully he's smart enough to realize that, hey, that I got a good thing here. And in Chicago, I can make endorsements and it's a great town and the team really likes me. I'll sign for $2 million a year for a 4-year contract. My family is set for a long time. So hopefully, but that's indeed a high priority. The whole Cody Parker post Robbie Gould era has made me convinced that I need to place a higher value on those guys that get you to 3 points. And with the field goals having been moved back and it's not the automatic point anymore. You need a good kicker, and those guys can win you. As Shane Marsaw used to say, they can win you 2 or 3 games a season, and that's totally correct.
It makes me fucking sick thinking that Cody Parkey is kicking again this weekend for the Cleveland Browns in the AFC.
He's going to win a Super Bowl probably before. Oh my God!
I would love it if it were Cleveland at Buffalo for the AFC Championship. That would be great because the Browns and the Bills fans are probably the closest thing to Bears fans in the sense that they're all passionate and loyal despite massive, copious amounts of losing.
The major networks wouldn't know what to cover. There's no East or West Coast teams.
This is again a conspiracy theory, but I strongly believe the league will do everything it can to make sure it's Tampa Bay at Green Bay in the NFC Championship.
I can just agree.
They'll be jacking off at the idea of Brady versus Rodgers, and then they want Rodgers and Mahomes in the battle of State Farm, and whose fucking discount is more. That's their Super Bowl.
That's absolutely what they want. And the best part is, I think Tom Brady can ruin the whole thing because he's Tom frickin' Brady.
Yeah, I would rather see Tampa win it than Green Bay, but I hope that it's Cleveland or Buffalo that makes it in the AFC. I want Kansas City out.
I would.
Andy Reid is shit the bed so many times in the playoffs that, like, if there's one guy coaching that could blow it, a 15-1 team, I could see it being Andy Reid.
Yes, absolutely. He's done it enough times in the past.
I mean, even their Super Bowl last year, they were down the majority of the game because he did what he always does. He gets extremely conservative in the playoffs.
Well, and then Damian Williams had the game of his life and somehow wasn't the MVP. But
that happens all the fucking time. Like Ray Lewis won Super Bowl MVP in Super Bowl 35 for having 5 tackles. No sacks, no touchdowns, just 5 tackles. But he's Ray Lewis.
Well, it's just like if the Bears had won against
Urlacher. Urlacher would have been MVP for no reason.
Wouldn't matter what kind of game he played.
Peyton Manning that game won MVP for no reason. The Bears were eaten alive by both of the Colts running backs.
Yeah.
Joseph Adai and Dominic Rhodes. They both had great games against us. It wasn't Peyton Manning. He had the one throw to Reggie Wayne, but beyond that, he just dumped off screen passes all night.
No, I was honestly surprised that Peyton Manning didn't win MVP in Super Bowl 50.
Oh, yeah, because even though he was garbage, but yeah, just because. You're right.
Higher afterwards too, so you kind of felt like they're going to give it to him just because, and it was nice to see.
Yeah, but thankfully the linebacker got it. What's his name? The guy wears glasses all the time when you see him in Denver.
Von Miller.
Von Miller. Yeah, there you go.
The guy who went out to get a tattoo and caught COVID.
Oh, that's right. What else you got, Mr. Dan Aguirre?
Well, it's already 10 or 11:15, and again, I don't think Zim is a huge political guy, but at some point we need to do even if it's next week, talk about January 6th, and all that shit that happened. But
yeah, let's hold it off to next Monday. I just want to headline that besides the reason that we didn't do a show yesterday, it was because of the Bears loss. But in addition to that, I was just bummed out about what happened January 6th at our nation's capital, and I will be bummed out about that for years. And so I'll just leave it at that. Dan and I, and if somebody wants to join us to talk politics, we usually do 2 hours, 3 hours of football talk, and then an hour of politics, movies, what have you. Let's make sure we have sufficient enough time to talk about that. And so let's table it for next Monday when we do one of our 4 or 5 hour shows.
I got one comment then,
please.
And I'll leave it at that rhetorically. The thing that's killing me with supporters on that side, and you all can stone me if you want. I keep hearing, what about this? Or what about Antifa? Like if I were charged with a crime, let's say I was charged with murder or rape or just something horrific, my defense in court couldn't be, what about the other guy? What about the fact that there are other people charged with a similar crime? Okay, so Antifa, there was some riot. Okay, that has nothing to do with January 6th. Nothing. But yet that's their argument to absolve these fucking... I'll stop. Go Bears. How do we get back on track and not have a 5-year rebuild? Which is, I always look at the Rams in 98 going 4-12 and then winning the Super Bowl the next year. And you can say, oh, well, they had Kurt Warner. Nobody fucking knew who Kurt Warner was yet. So Kurt Warner had been cut by the Packers, for fuck's sake. And thank God that they didn't figure out who he was. But because I would have hated Kurt Warner then. But I'm just saying, maybe it's not so dire as we all think. Maybe it's not a 5-year rebuild. Maybe there's a chance that you bring in a coordinator a defensive coordinator who plays aggressively and can get the best out of this defense and somehow remind Eddie Jackson how to play safety and remind Khalil Mack how to rush the passer.
And Robert Quinn, since we're probably going to be stuck with you, we're going to alleviate you from all your past coverage duties and just feed you some raw meat with a little gunpowder on it and have you go after the quarterback.
Isn't it such a harsh indictment on the Bears coaches when you watch the playoff game Saturday and see Leonard Floyd balling his ass off?
Oh, my gosh. I would hope that is part of the discussions that are going on. So let me do a little role playing here. George McCaskey comes in and talks to the GM and says, hey, you had me spend all this money on Robert Quinn and you didn't want to pick up the 5th-year option on Leonard Floyd. And I'm looking at the stats here, and Leonard Floyd has 11, 12 sacks, at least 10. And
he has more than Mack.
Yeah, he's got at least 8 more he's got at least 8 more than Quinn and 2 or 3 more than Mack. What am I doing here? Why am I spending this money? Why am I listening to you guys? You're spending my money and I'm not getting the results for it. So help me explain what is going on here and how you're going to fix it. Because if you don't have a good explanation for that, then pack your shit and get the fuck out of here.
Hey, Jeff Dickerson has written a story basically saying the same thing now. Dateline Chicago Bears defensive coordinator, former Indianapolis head coach Chuck Pagano has decided to retire. League sources told ESPN, confirming multiple reports. The Bears are likely to retain head coach Matt Nagy and general manager Ryan Pace, sources said. And my friend just shared this article with me, who's a Steeler fan because of where I live. He's like, I have to admit, I'm very shocked. He's like, how could the Bears not fire that guy? I think that's what everybody thinks, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, Dan, did you have something else? Because there is a question in the chat room I would love for you to answer along with Zim and myself. This is Unknown Cuts. He goes, guys, if you guys were team president for the Bears with the current state of the team, who would you hire as the GM? Who would you hire as the head coach? And who would your quarterback be? You guys think about it, and let me give you let me give a quick answer to this. There are a number of guys that I would interview for the job. The first person I would interview is Champ Kelly, who is the current Chicago Bears assistant director of pro personnel, because I always feel that you should try to promote people from within. But the thing about Champ Kelly is that the title says assistant director of pro personnel. Where was he on this whole Robert Quinn thing? Where was he on this whole Khalil Mack thing? Where was he on some of the other free agent guys that they've signed that have been bust? Because, the guy has developed a sterling reputation. And in fact, he's already gone out on 1 or 2 job interviews, but I'm not sure, that he's deserving. So I talked to him. He's the first guy that I would talk to. The second guy I would talk to is Mike Bergonzi, the Kansas City Chiefs director of football operations. He is, by most respects, he is considered the hottest candidate for a GM job. I would also talk to Ian Cunningham, the Eagles assistant director of player personnel. I think that this guy has done a good job of drafting players. I would talk to Lake Dawson of the Buffalo Bills, the assistant director of college scouting there. I would talk to Ed Dodds, and Ed Dodds might be the number 1 guy on my list that I would look most forward to interviewing. This Dodds is of that Chris Ballard school. He's working for Chris Ballard now with the Colts, and we all know that the Bears made a mistake in hiring Ryan Pace over Chris Ballard. So I would try to take Chris Ballard's right-hand man, Dodds. So those are just a few of the names. And then as for head coaches, I would go with those guys that are the hot names, the Eric Bieniemys and so forth. But it's got to start with your GM finding the right guy. And then I would tell that GM, Ed Dodds or whoever it is, I would say, blow the whole fucking thing up. Blow it up. Don't try to salvage what we have and try to win. Blow it all up and bring me a fucking title in 3 to 5 years. That's how
why I wouldn't hire Eric Bieniemy, though, because you're going to just continue trying to be Kansas City light. Mm-hmm. And like I argue every week, every time we bring somebody from Kansas City, it's a failure. And moreover, most Andy Reid assistants are also failures, with the exception of Doug Peterson, when they become head coaches, just like Bill Belichick's assistants. So I'm not sold on Bieniemy. Maybe he'll be fine, but I don't want him because I just don't want more Kansas City light. But if you're wanting to continue that system, mm-hmm. then he makes sense. And maybe bring the guy like you were talking about from Kansas City. I don't know his name. The guy you referenced as the GM. And maybe that's the way you go. Personally, I just would like to get away from that scheme that's not successful. It never works in Chicago. And even now, with the players that we have, like, we need to, and I'm not even a guy that doesn't want to pass, because I am, but with the people we've got, we need to run. We need to solidify our offensive line and run David Montgomery. That's not what Kansas City wants to do. That's not what Bieniemy wants to do. That's not what Nagy wants to do. I want to get the fuck away from Kansas City.
Mm-hmm. All right.
I would like the defensive coordinator from San Francisco.
Somebody was just asking about him. Isn't it Robert
Saul or something?
Salil?
I like his intensity, and I like a guy like that that's got fire. Like, yeah. That's, again, like a Ditka type or a Bill Cowher type, mm-hmm. or John Madden type, somebody that's got some intensity. I think we're lacking that. And again, that's why I've advocated for Jim Harbaugh. Mm-hmm. But I think Michigan gave him an extension, right?
I believe, yes, Jim Harbaugh is there for the next 3 to 5 years. So I'm not a Harbaugh fan. I'm glad that he's gone. I do like that mix, though, of a fiery head coach who is also a smart guy. The problem with Ditka is that he was a great fiery head coach. He got players to play with a chip on their shoulders. But he is never going to be remembered for his offensive genius, and definitely he was not a defensive coach. I mean, he was a special teams coach, a damn good one with Dallas, but he never did anything innovative. And I like coaches who think out of the box. But he was really good at getting players to come out of the tunnel ready to just annihilate opponents. Zim, go ahead, Dan, because I know you got to leave, and then Zim and I will talk about coaches and GMs.
I was just going to say that's one of the criticisms I have for Matt Nagy. It seems like throughout his duration as coach, more often than not, the Bears seem to be flat, especially coming out of for the second half.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so he's exactly the opposite of Ditka. And I know in Chicago, we all put Ditka on a pedestal, and rightfully so, because he earned that. And I'm not trying to go back to 1985, but just a guy with a little bit more intensity, even if it's the coordinator,
mm-hmm.
you know, just somebody. Like, that's why I did, like, going back full circle. That's why I don't want to hire within on the defense. I don't want more of the same shit. I want something. If Nagy's going to stay, I want radical change on the defense. I want blitzing. I want pressure. I want the corners to not play 7 and 8 yards off of the ball, off the receiver. I want some bump and run, man.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Jesus Christ. Like, they never make any adjustments, and it's fucking maddening. But the last thing I'll say is I do got to go. And this goes back to what you and I talked about, the romanticism of NFL films.
Oh, yeah.
I really strongly loved. Did you notice the Coors Light commercial this weekend where they were like, why isn't Tom Flores in the Hall of Fame?
I missed it. I saw it trending. I saw Tom Flores' name trending. So there was a commercial involved with that?
Yeah, they was like showing all he did as a player and all the Super Bowl. You know, he won the 2 Super Bowls as head coach. He was Madden's coordinator in the other one. And they were saying all these things he did. And he's like, why isn't Tom Flores in the Hall of Fame? And it shows Tom Flores. He looks exactly the same. And he's like, yeah, good question. I don't know. And they showed a Coors Light can, and they said, do we want to make a difference with that? And they've got a can with Flores' face on it.
Is that right?
It's so fucking great. What a great ad campaign. You could say, oh, they're capitulating to the Latino vote or whatever nonsense that someone would spew off that. He is a Hall of Fame worthy coach, in my opinion. So I love that just because he doesn't do TV, he gets no love. Like Jimmy Johnson's in the Hall of Fame,
mm-hmm.
just because he's been on Fox the last 25 years.
Mm-hmm.
So I love to see that Flores got just out of nowhere, got some momentum. Like the people are reminded by what a great coach he actually was with the Raiders, but I will digress. I wish you gentlemen well. And I'll listen to the rest of the show in podcast form. And Zim, I hope you come back. I hope I didn't talk too much. I hope you'll be back on the show with us. And then I look forward to making conservatives hate us on Monday.
Jeremy is saying, fuck you. He's not the only conservative in the chat room that's saying, fuck you. Hey, Dan, safe travels, and we'll talk to you soon. Okay, brother?
All right. You be well. Thank you.
All right.
Bye.
Zim, you want to answer this question about who you would pick as the GM, coach, and quarterback for 2021? Let's say, you're given the keys to the organization. Hey, Zim, welcome. Here's your office here at Hallis Hall. You make the decisions, and your budget is unlimited. Go for it, brother.
First of all, they've made a major fucking mistake. That's what they're going for. But no, I do like Ed Dodd from
Colts,
Indianapolis.
Mm-hmm.
As a GM candidate, he makes a lot of sense. Another hot name that's been out there has been Louis Riddick.
Mm-hmm.
And I think part of the reason he's such a hot name is just because he's on TV, but it doesn't disqualify him by any means. He's absolutely qualified to do the job. He's a smart guy. And I mean, for whatever it's worth in the modern NFL, it's a minority hire. So
mm-hmm.
not that should ever be a factor into that hiring decision.
Mm-hmm.
It's just something that for whatever reason seems to make it more or less appealing at points, which
mm-hmm.
whatever, I'm going to get off that point.
No, I think it's a valid point, though. I mean, you've got 60-70% of the players are African American, so there has to be a time where you should kind of factor that into what percentage you have in your front office, and that doesn't negate you hiring the best person for the job. what it means is let's make sure that when you're bringing in candidates to interview, that ratio is pretty much the same. It should be, 60%, and maybe not for general manager positions because the pipeline hasn't been filled. But general managers, they come from the scouting departments and from other areas, and so make sure that pipeline is filled so that people of color get a fair opportunity. I think that's a fair point. Please feel free to continue. Are you still there? Oh my gosh. I think we lost our guy, Zim Zimmerman. Where are you? So he started talking a little race and he just said, get the fuck out of here. All right. Well, let me continue on this topic. And if, hey, Zim, are you there? All right. There he goes. Let's see if he calls back. Hold on a second. I'm calling Zim back. He will pick up, I'm sure. If not, then it appears his internet died. So that's fine. Let me see if he picks this up, guys. This is live. That's the exciting thing about live. Shit just doesn't happen sometimes. And so, yeah, he's not going to pick up. All right. So I'm going to finish with this. Some more thoughts on other GM candidates. The guy from the Baltimore Ravens, who is the director of player personnel, his name is Joe Hortiz. I mean, the Ravens have a sterling reputation for their player acquisition over the years. So anytime you get a guy from the Ravens organization, you have got to feel really good about it. So let me see. Zim says to try him again. I will do that. Let's see here. Sorry, fellas. It is difficult for me. Zim Zimmerman. So, Joe Hortiz is a potential candidate. Then Adam Peters, the San Francisco 49ers vice president of player personnel. He's a guy who has had a long resume, success in. There he is. Zim Zimmerman.
I apologize. It seems that my internet dropped out. So
no
while
worries.
I'm rebooting it, my audio quality will suffer.
No worries. Michael Diaz was serving shots to everyone here at the bar room while we got you back on. And I was just naming a couple of other names that I would love to see the Bears interview. And one of them is this guy, Joe Hortiz, who is the Baltimore Ravens director of player personnel. Everybody knows Ozzie Newsome's success with the Ravens. So anytime you get somebody from his staff would be a good thing. This guy has had a lot of success working with the Ravens, and he's definitely a guy you got to interview. Adam Peters, the San Francisco 49ers vice president of player personnel. JoJo Wooden, the Chargers director of player personnel. He's a guy that I would love to talk to. So there's, in my mind, there is almost a dozen general manager candidates that I would love for the Chicago Bears to interview. But unfortunately, it doesn't look like they're going to be hiring a general manager because according to reports from Dan Wiederer and other sources, it appears that Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy will be returning in 2021. So I forgot what we were talking about when you got dropped off. What were you saying?
It was just filling the spots of general manager, head coach, and
that quarterback position
for the Bears.
Right.
And I mean, it all depends kind of if we're going realistic or if we're thinking, a dream scenario,
Let's go dream scenario first.
I mean, if the Bears find a way that they could acquire Deshaun Watson, I mean, I think he's proven, particularly people like me, wrong. that he can really be a great quarterback in this league. I mean, they took away his best weapon and he led the league in passing still, which speaks a lot to his credit. And if he truly is angry and wants out in Houston, there's no reason not to go get him if the cost is reasonable. In a dream scenario, you get him for a first round pick and Khalil Mack, but I don't know if this new GM is as dumb as their last one was. So,
so go on with coaches and quarterbacks. Your thoughts on that?
So somebody that came into my mind, and okay, good. Sorry, I think my internet's back up, so we can get my audio quality back to where it was if you would like. But
no, it sounds good. Continue on.
Okay. As long as it sounds good to you, I'm good with it. At any rate, we were talking young quarterbacks that might actually be attainable for the Bears, and somebody who I think might actually be a legitimate option. And I know that Dan was going on about his hatred for left-handed quarterbacks earlier, but I think Tua Tagovailoa might actually be a legitimate option for the Bears. It would be interesting to see. And I don't know exactly how it would happen. But if I recall correctly, don't the Dolphins have a very high draft pick this year?
The Dolphins have the third pick that they acquired from the Houston Texans in that trade that they committed. I forgot what the trade was, but it was
Laramie. It was the Laramie Tunsil.
There you go, the Laramie Tunsil, who, by the way, has been somewhat disappointing as a left tackle. There were a lot of people who wanted to die on their swords for Laramie Tunsil. He's okay. He's not that much better than Charles Leno, but nonetheless, it is the Dolphins with the third overall pick. So they could land somebody like a here's what's probably going to happen. Jacksonville picks first, the Jets pick second, and Miami picks third. So Trevor Lawrence is going to go to the Jaguars, and then the Jets probably are going to pick a quarterback. The whole Sam Darnold thing is probably, going to go away. And so it's either going to be Justin Fields, or you could see this kid from BYU, Zach Wilson, climb up the charts and take that second spot from Justin Fields. And then it's Miami. They would, if Justin Fields falls to number 3, that would be a tough choice, but I don't think that they're ready to give up on Tua. I really don't.
No, I'm not saying that they would by any means. The package that you would have to put together to acquire him would be significant. Absolutely.
Yep.
But it's not entirely unrealistic because they have that super high draft pick that they could potentially replace him, if you make a deal that they just can't say no to. And it depends on how desperate the Bears really are to try and get a young quarterback in the building.
Yeah, I don't see Tua to me is not a for sure prospect. I think that Tua.
No, not by any means.
Yeah. So I mean, unless you get him at a bargain rate, I wouldn't even consider that. If anything, I would rather have Ryan Fitzpatrick as your kind of bridge quarterback to, drafting somebody. There's some interesting names in this year's draft, and some interesting names in the 2022 draft too. But in the second round, you're going to see guys like Sam Ehlinger from Texas available, a guy that Danny Schimmon loves a lot. He's been touting him for the last 2 years. There's the guy that played at Wake Forest, Jamie Newman. He had transferred over to Georgia, and unfortunately he chose to opt out, so we never got to see him against SEC action. But he's a guy who has all the tools to be a good quarterback. We'll see how he tests at the combine, and he's supposed to play at the Senior Bowl. Hopefully that's going to happen, and hopefully he shines. But he could be a good second-round pick because everybody is saying, hey, draft an offensive lineman. There's going to be some dynamite offensive linemen in round 1 and some pretty good ones too, falling to rounds 2 and 3. So it's because it's a deep offensive lineman draft class. And I think it's a fairly deep quarterback class. So if you're going to go offensive lineman and quarterback, you can target those two positions in the first 2 rounds of the draft and walk away with some promising players.
Yeah, that's absolutely a possibility, especially considering, how deep the offensive line is in this year's draft from what I've understood. I'm not a huge draft guy, but everybody who I know who is telling me what a deep offensive line draft this is. So that bodes well for that particular position. The quarterback, once you get into the second round, though, you're kind of taking shots on guys that you're not really sure about. That's where guys like Deshaun Kaiser of recent memory went. On the other hand, Russell Wilson wound up going in the third round.
In the third round, exactly.
Kirk Cousins went in the fourth round. It feels a lot more like you're taking a shot at a guy rather than acquiring somebody. If you could go after somebody in either free agency or by a trade.
Yeah, it's just that you can target.
And that's the nature of the draft.
Absolutely. I mean, you've got to project, and you've got to then have the coaching staff to develop those guys. And one of the things that I like about the current coaching staff is like I said earlier in the show, I'm a huge fan of John DeFilippo. They should have drafted a quarterback last season so that quarterback would have had access to DeFilippo and learned, about quarterbacking under probably one of the top 5 quarterback coaches in the NFL. The fact that they didn't invest a draft pick or even an undrafted free agent, like the kid out of Washington that I fell in love with at the Senior Bowl, and his name escapes me right now. But you had to bring in a young guy who could potentially learn and could potentially turn into a diamond in the rough. And the Bears have not done that. They've got to identify a quarterback and go after him in this 2021 draft. And they have now, they being Ryan Pace. If Ryan Pace is indeed the general manager, Anthony Gordon, thank you, Stephen. Anthony Gordon, and he's out there as a free agent. He should be at Hallishaw tomorrow talking about a futures reserve contract, in my opinion. But anyway, back to my point. You have John DeFilippo and Matt Nagy to help you make that choice for a quarterback. And you got to gamble with those two guys. It's not like, those guys are complete idiots. And I have a lot of faith in DeFilippo. So if you've made the decision, if the Bears organization has made the decision to retain those two guys being Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy, then you got to build this team through the draft, and you got to find a long-term answer, a franchise quarterback in this draft, identify him, and then have the DeFilippo, have the coaching staff on hand where you can quickly develop that guy into a starting quarterback. That's the only answer out of this mess that we're in.
That's it. I mean, at the very least, you have to identify somebody that you like, even if they're a day 3 talent, and go get them. What has Ryan Pace's thing been through his whole tenure with the Bears? It's that conviction. It's going and getting a guy. Why don't you go and get the right guy this time?
Thank you.
It's annoying to see him keep saying, we really liked what we saw and we're going to go get him and we did what we had to do to acquire him. Well, why don't you talk to your scouts a little more? Because your scouts seem to be really identifying some quality talent in the later rounds of this draft, and that's something that I believe was discussed either last week or the week before on one of the barroom shows, but I could be mistaken, is that, your general manager is really responsible for your first couple of picks, but then your scouting department is more responsible for the later picks.
That's correct.
So Ryan Pace has done a great job of putting together a scouting department. He needs to listen to them more in the earlier rounds in order to sucd and keep his job.
That's correct. It was the Greg Gabriel Talks Bears show.
That's it.
Greg is the former director of college scouting for the Chicago Bears. And so I asked him, is it true what I read that, general managers usually are much more focused on the first round pick because that's where the big salary investment is going to be? And he says, absolutely. After that, they just rely on the scouting staff to make those picks for the most part. I mean, Ryan Pace is still making the approval, but it's the scouts that come and say, Here's who we think is the best players available for the second round, best players available for the third round, and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're absolutely right. That's where they've had success. So it's these scouts who are doing better than Ryan Pace with the decision making on player acquisition via the draft. And in terms of signing free agents, there have been some big busts. Akeem Hicks was a great acquisition, but man, oh man, the Robert Quinn thing, I disliked that from the very beginning. A 4-3 defensive end, and you're asking to have him learn a whole new defense where he's got to go into coverage, a 30-plus-year-old defensive end. I don't know. That was just so stupid. And I bet you that the reason Chuck Pagano retired today was because he was probably the one saying, yeah, I think we maybe, Leonard Floyd out, Robert Quinn in. And he's, a lot of people are saying he's probably taking the bullet for a bad decision made by Ryan Pace, but maybe it was him pounding the table for Robert Quinn. So we probably will never know the answer to that, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if Pagano wanted the veteran over Leonard Floyd, somebody he probably, was frustrated with because he wasn't delivering the kind of results in his first year as defensive coordinator that he wanted.
Yeah, I mean, and it really does look like it could have been that for Chuck. I will say that now that you point that out, it does kind of feel like there was a shift in defensive philosophy as far as acquiring talent since Chuck Pagano arrived. When Vic was here, it was a lot about drafting young players, developing young players. And if you didn't draft and develop them, then you found guys looking for their second contracts. You found guys that you could get at a good price, but still continued to develop.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas as soon as Pagano got here, this defense started rapidly getting older. And it wasn't because they stopped doing that. It was more because they started signing older free agents. The re-signing of Danny Trevathan, the acquisition of Robert Quinn. Tashawn Gibson isn't exactly a spring chicken out there, As great as he played, he's still an older defensive back. And yeah, part of it's the natural attrition as players just get older year after year. But again, the talent wasn't being replenished with young talent. It was being replaced with older talent. And that doesn't cut it in this league. And it does feel like that shift was when Pagano came. So maybe it was his philosophy influencing Ryan Pace's decision-making.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not to try and defend Pagano or anything. That's not to try and say one thing or another. At the end of the day, Ryan Pace is still the GM and should have said, no, this is what we're doing.
Yep, totally with you. Unknown Cuts in the chat room has a cool question here. What if the Bears pull one under us? And George McCaskey, if he does have a press conference, and I think he will, I'm pretty 99% sure he will. And George comes out and says that they fired both Pace and Nagy, and Ted is going to retire. What would your reaction be to that news, Zim?
I would have to wake up. That would be my immediate reaction because that's just not happening. It's just not. Unfortunately, it would be awesome.
Mm-hmm.
What I think we could realistically see, and I know I brought this up before, and it was the first thing mentioned when I came on. But what if, either Ted Phillips retires or Ted Phillips is moved into a president of business operations role instead,
right? And
then Pace is moved into the president of football operations. That is a real thing I could easily see happening.
Yeah.
Nagy keeps his job. They find a new defensive coordinator and GM. And what is actually a demotion for Pace looks like a promotion.
Mm-hmm.
Here's something that allows them to keep their eyes on him a lot closer.
Yeah. Here's why I think that there is a sliver of a possibility something like that could happen. It could be that George McCaskey said, you know what, I'm going to give these guys a fair shot. I'm going to wait till the entire season is over before I start to really make an evaluation and ask questions of them about what happened, what went wrong, and so forth. Yes, we talk every week during the season, but I wasn't talking so much about trying to find out, if they have a plan for 2021 and beyond. I was talking about more immediate things. So now that the season is over, I've had over the last 2 or 3 days several meetings with them where we've gone over everything from how the offense runs to the discipline issues to why the failings on defense, why the money that we invested in certain players wasn't panning out, why we have looked really, really bad against the top teams in the NFL, like the Green Bay Packers. And I mulled it over, and I took my time mulling it over because, I've got money invested in these guys. Ryan Pace has another year left on his GM contract, and Matt Nagy has another year left on his coaching contract. And I also wanted to be fair to those guys. So I've mulled it over, and I've decided that I don't want them around anymore. I don't want to see them. I don't want to hear them. I'm going to bring somebody else in, and I'm starting my interview process today.
And to play devil's advocate to my own point that I was just making, maybe that's why Pagano retired instead of got fired, is because, he's been around the league a while. He knows what it feels like when you're about to get fired. He knows what it looks like.
Oh, yeah.
Nagy's never really been fired, has he?
I don't think so. No, never.
I think when he left Philly for Kansas City, it was because Andy Reid brought him with, not because he was truly out in Philly. And I could be wrong on that, but Ryan Pace, same thing. Ryan Pace spent his entire career with the Saints until taking the Bears jobs. So these guys don't exactly know what it's like to be fired. And maybe Pagano saw the writing on the wall and jumped ship.
UAPB 83 in Nagy's defense, he called decent pass plays. Trestman had a better scheme. He ran the ball. Nagy's scheme is pass, and his definition of run is screen. I'm not sure I agree with that. But again, I think we saw a head coach who felt like he could not fully implement his playbook because he didn't trust the quarterback. And as somebody said an hour or two ago in the chat room, that, there's a possibility that Trubisky just wasn't executing that playbook in practice. He saw him throwing interceptions, and so he played things much more conservatively. I do think that there's a possibility Nagy just said, "Screw this! I want to make sure that we don't bring Mitch Trubisky back next season, and I know I'm coming back, so let's just tank this game." You think there's any possibility of that?
No, I absolutely do. I think there's a real possibility that Nagy knew his job was safe, and that's why he went back to play calling. He no longer had a job to save, so he said, "Fuck it, I'm doing what I want to do now." And because didn't that report that the beliefs where Nagy's job was safe come out in week 16 before that Packers game? Yeah. So who's to say that report isn't accurate? And he said, "Well, my job's safe. I'm going back to what I want to do." And, see you, Mitch. If you can't run what I want to run, we're out of here. And that could also explain the conservative play calling in the playoff game. That I'm sorry, but there was no way in hell he, honest to God, thought that offensive game plan was going to beat the Saints. There's no way he truly believed that.
Yeah.
That was let's get out of here without too much damage done and just get to the offseason.
Yeah, all throughout the week, he was saying we're going to have to score points against this team. This is the Saints offense and so forth. So, unless, again, he was bullshitting, and he has become a bullshit artist over the last season or so. If that was the offensive scheme that he thought was going to score a lot of points against the Saints defense, then boy, oh boy, we got some big problems with this guy. So I do believe that he was not being forthright, that their whole strategy for that game was let's count on the defense to hold them. And for the most part, they did. And let's play ball control offense. And for the most part, they did not. In fact, they definitely did not play a good ball control offense. The previous week against the Green Bay Packers, they played much better at a ball control offense against the Saints. They just weren't converting third downs. They were getting into third and long often. It was just an ugly sight. And hopefully we won't see it again. All right, my brother, let's go to our final thoughts here and then pull the plug on this edition of Dan and Aldo, Bare Their Souls. You got anything you want to bare your soul about? Any private things, any you've been doing anything illegal that you want to share with us?
No, nothing illegal lately.
I like the way you said that. No, I don't think so.
I'm adjusting to family life. That's all. So I'm just trying to, keep my head down low and just figure it out the best I can one day at a time.
What's your music career looking like right now?
Oh, that is dead in the water.
I saw pictures of you with your guitar. It looked like you were playing on a stage and stuff, and you were diving into the audience and stuff. You're not doing that anymore?
No, those are from years ago. That was from when I was a young man.
You're an old man now, 26, 27, right?
Yeah. No, I'll be turning 27 or 27. I'll be turning 28 Super Bowl week. And it got to that point in my life where it was like, all right, this music was a lot of fun while it lasted, but it's time to accept that, I'm not going anywhere with it. I'm not doing anything with it. So it's time to move on. And not too terribly long after I came to that decision, this pandemic hit, and that made things real easy to just quit and, just walk away from it because there's nowhere to go play anymore. There's nowhere to perform.
Are you writing any songs or anything?
I was working with some friends and we were writing music for a little while. But that kind of also petered out just because of the pandemic. It was, we were getting together as much as we could and safely at that. And then, it was, hey, I had a coworker test positive, so I have to take 2 weeks off. Hey, we had a client come in that tested positive and I got to take a week off and this, that, and the other thing. And it was just like, there was no way to consistently keep it up. And unfortunately, just kind of fell by the wayside.
Well, I hope that you, pick it up again. I've heard a couple of your things and you were pretty damn good at it. So if you want to write something for Bears Barroom, a theme song for Dan and Aldo, Bare Their Souls, send it on over, man.
Well, I appreciate that. It's something that, it'll always be in my heart and I'm always going to try and keep doing, prior to the pandemic, when I had accepted that maybe being a rock star wasn't going to happen. I decided to start playing in a cover band, just as a way to keep playing. It's kind of where music careers go to die, but I still get to play and there's a chance that I get to make music while doing it, or make money while doing it.
And it's fun. There's nothing, a lot of people are critical of cover bands, but here's the thing. You go to a concert where there's a really good cover band and you talk to the people there, you are bringing a lot of joy to those people's lives. I've been to a number of them and I like to, when I'm seeing a movie or a play or a concert, I like to gauge audience reaction. And when you're in the presence of a really good cover band, man, you're seeing people with big smiles on their face, with chills on their arms and stuff.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
Well, and that's it. And the concept of this particular band, I think it had a really good chance. And hopefully we continue once it's safe to do so. But we're kind of scattered all over the state, so we don't, we can't really come together safely to practice. So, but lately, there's been an emerging scene of something called emo night, which is very popular amongst millennials. I find a lot of people, I'm usually one of the younger people there. And it usually is people between about 25 and 35 ish. And it's a bunch of music from like the early 2000s, the mid 2000s. It's just a good time. And we were going to play music that you would normally hear at emo night. rather than having a DJ just play it to you.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's got a real chance to be fun, but we'll see how it goes. Like I said, aside from that, though, getting used to family life. My new girlfriend has a 6-year-old, and we are also expecting my first child.
Well,
So
congratulations, Mr. Steven Zim Zimmerman. Woo-hoo.
thank you.
Boy or girl, do you know?
It's going to be a boy.
Oh, you took a look at the what's it called? The MR? No, it's not called an MRI. It's called a sonogram.
Ultrasound.
Ultrasound.
Sonogram.
There you go. You saw that big dick, and you were proud, huh?
We actually found out earlier than that. There's technology now is incredible,
Mm-hmm.
and she was able to get a blood test done at, I want to say, 14 weeks. So it was pretty early along. We were able to find out the sex of the baby, and we got visual confirmation last Friday at the 20-week appointment. So.
And when is the baby due?
May 31st is the official due date, but I got a feeling he's going to come sooner than that. So
very cool. I got it circled on my calendar, brother. I want to thank
my
you for
sister.
Go ahead.
My sister already bought him a Mitchell Trubisky onesie, to which I told her that's a waste of money. He's not even going to be on the team.
That's hilarious. Well, yeah, I have as gifts, because again, I go by the motto, I do not buy jerseys of any current players unless I know that they are going to, unless they have already had several years of success. So for instance, I would buy an Akeem Hicks jersey now because he's one of my favorite players. And if he were not a Chicago Bear in 2021 and beyond, I still would wear that jersey proudly. But somebody bought me a Mitch Trubisky jersey a few years ago and an autographed football of Mitchell Trubisky. And, I thank you very much. It's great present and so forth. But, deep down inside, I'm like, this guy could be a bust. And so,
yeah, I got my Trubisky jersey too. So my son and I are going to be able to be losers together.
That's a great way to bring him into the world of Chicago Bear fandom. Here's your Trubisky onesie.
And I know you're trying to wrap it up, so just real quick before we're done.
It's okay.
In the great old days of these late night shows, real quick. I had like this breakdown after the game on Sunday where I just needed to sit for about 30 to 45 minutes and just process everything, because I realized that this team's probably not going to be good until my son is old enough to understand that they're not good.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense.
No, it makes total sense.
I now have to sit here. They lost this game and their window's closed now. I don't care what anybody says. You're not going to be able to convince me this window's back open without some drastic changes.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm kind of sitting there and just processing, like, this team is going to be terrible for I don't even know how long. And now I've got to raise a kid and I've got to teach this child. And I should also say, I mentioned she's got a 6-year-old as well. And he, because of all the Bears decorum at my apartment, has grown an affinity for the Chicago Bears already. So now I've got 2 boys that I'm going to have to bring up and teach them, like, this is why we root for this team. I know they're not very good and they haven't been very good. And, you're allowed to root for any team except for the guys wearing green and gold. But this
who are very good
to root for. And
yeah, that's quite the challenge for any young dad, is to get them to try to, push them a little bit into being a fan of a team that's constantly breaking your heart. By the way, I saw that Nickelodeon had outstanding ratings for their coverage of the Bears Saints game. Did you see any of their coverage of that game with the green slime when people would score touchdowns and stuff?
I don't have cable, so I wasn't able to watch it live. I watched the game on Amazon Prime, which had the CBS feed.
Right.
But the highlights I saw looked awesome.
Yeah.
It looked like it was a blast. I know that my girlfriend's son was not very happy with me because he thought I lied to him when I joked that SpongeBob, Patrick, and Squidward would be calling that game. but he was over at well, he was not with us that day, and I don't know if he managed to get a chance to watch any of the broadcast or not. But I think that would have been a great thing for me to be able to sit down with a young child, even an older child, somebody in the 10 to 12 range,
Absolutely.
They would be able to follow the game better, but the SpongeBob stuff would still appeal. And I think it was a really unique idea. They got to get Cordell Patterson to keep a lid on it a little better when the mic is hot. But
what happened there?
From that, oh, you didn't hear that?
Mm-mm.
Oh, they were calling some special teams penalty on the Bears, and Cordell Patterson is standing well within, within range of the microphone. The referee calls, a holding 84 or whatever, and you just hear Cordell Patterson go, "Man, the fuck!" right on, like audibly on Nickelodeon and everything. So.
Well, Nickelodeon should have had that 7-second delay. I heard another thing.
I agree
that they were criticized for is Taysom Hill was hit near the sideline and got up groggy, and clearly, he was showing symptoms of a concussion. And Nate Burleson, who was doing the color commentary in the game, said, "Oh yeah, that happens in football. It's like scraping your knee. You get up and you get back in there." Well, that didn't go over well with a lot of people who are very cautious about, concussions that kids suffer when playing football. So that they were criticized for that. And I can't believe that the NFL didn't coach these guys up to be careful about how they would describe a potential head injury.
That's very surprising to me that, especially Burleson, somebody who's used to being on live TV and, knows how to ad-lib that kind of stuff. It's unfortunate. But, moving forward, I do think that there's definitely a market for it. I listened to several other Bears podcasts from beat writers, I guess is the best way to put it. And a lot of them were talking about watching the game with their kids, and it makes it more of a family experience.
Absolutely.
So, as somebody who's now looking at that in my near future and, my present, in all honesty, I think it's a great idea. I think it, like I said, it promotes more of a family aspect to the game. And for me, who's trying to now teach a 6-year-old who knows nothing about sports, anything about sports, it makes it a little easier and it makes it more entertaining for him.
Absolutely. And as somebody in the chat room said, who was it? Cad. This is a difficult name to pronounce. Cadfold Bears 85. He said that the Chicago Bears have a great history to teach a young Bears fan, and you can't go wrong with any of the jerseys, too, from the 85 team, the Ditka jerseys, the Butkus jerseys, too, the Peyton and Sayers jerseys. Even Cutler jerseys are good, says Catfull Bears 85. Would you buy your son a Cutler jersey?
Probably. I never had an issue with Jay. I liked him. I think he's either the best or the second best quarterback in Bears history, so there's nothing wrong with representing him.
Yeah. Get him one that says Smoking Jake. Suntora says, we'll save this up as the last question, then I got to get out of here. Although the question is, who wants to come to Chicago and play for Matt No Clue Nagy? And I agree. It's going to be hard to convince free agents to come, particularly when you're not going to have the most money to lure free agents over. So you got to figure out a way to lure them over. And maybe the best way is by telling them, Matt Nagy, we just fired him. Come on over. He's no longer here.
That's it.
Yeah, didn't you hear?
Jumping off from there, maybe that's why they kept Pace and Nagy, or are reportedly keeping Pace and Nagy, is what all the fans were saying is, who are you going to get that's better than Mitch to play quarterback? You got to keep Trubisky. All right, well, given the draft capital situation, which is back to normal, but it's nothing special, given the roster that you've got, given the cap situation that you got, who is going to want to be the GM of the Bears? Is it going to be anybody that's better than Ryan Pace? Who's going to want to be the head coach? Is it anybody that's going to be better than Matt Nagy? Maybe that's what the McCaskies see that we don't.
Well, I think, it's still one of the best jobs in the world. And so if you get assurances from the McCaskies that, listen, you have full autonomy, you're going to have a nice budget to work with, and you can build this team the way you see fit. If you get that authority and you're signed for a 5-year contract because it's going to take 3 to 5 years to rebuild the team, then I can see that. I mean, there aren't a lot of NFL general manager jobs open. Now, if a guy like Ed Dodds with the Indianapolis Colts is offered the general manager job at Jacksonville Jaguars, they got the first overall picks. They're going to get Trevor Lawrence. They got tons of free agent money available. You get to choose between the Jags and the Bears job. That's going to be a tough choice. You're going to have to sell the tradition and all that stuff. So that's a tough choice. But outside of it's still a great job for anyone who wants to be a general manager. All right. Catful Bears 85 says, good show, guys. Thanks again. Commiserating with Bears fans is a mental health break from all of the other crap happening out there. You got that, brother. And Steven Zim Zimmerman, tell people where they can find you on the internet.
Find me on Twitter at Raging Bear Fan, all one word. And it's Bear Fan, not Bears Fan. Aside from that, none of my other social media is really Bears related, so we'll just leave it to that. Occasionally, I do share some stuff about my music and about my personal life, but not a whole lot. So you'll probably get about the same as what you got on this podcast from me.
That's a good amount.
Some pretty uninteresting Bears takes, but some that are a little spicy, and none of which are possible without a jumping off point from other collaborators. So
there you go. You did a great job, my friend. And I'll tell people to follow Dan on Twitter. If they're Twitter followers, it's at BearsFan_Dan. And you can always find me at Bears Barroom on the Twitter machine. I want to thank everybody that joined us live. Great audience. And make sure you hit that like button. Subscribe to what we're doing here. And if you hit that little bell below the screen, it'll serve as a reminder. So anytime we come to you with one of our live programs, you'll get a notice saying that the Bears Barroom is live. And we promise you some good content. Tomorrow night or tomorrow morning, Mike North and I are recording a Mike North Advantage that you can only get through the audio podcast network. And so that's Bears Barroom Radio Network. And then tomorrow night, another audio podcast, and that's the Buffon 55 show. John Buffon is the nephew of the great Doug Buffon, who played 15 seasons with the Chicago Bears. And he and Alyssa Barbieri, who is the managing director of BearsWire.com, will talk with JJ Stankovitz of NBC Sports Chicago. JJ will have all the latest from Hallis Hall and talk about the 2020 season and look ahead to the 2021 season. And then I will join John and Alyssa for the final third of that show and share some of my opinions. So we've got two great programs coming tomorrow and lots more and some surprises too coming up later in the week. We'll fill you in on that. That's why it's good to give us a follow on our Twitter follow, which is at Bears Barroom. All right, Steve, thanks a lot again for coming on, and we definitely will do this again. Okay, brother?
Absolutely. Thank you very much for having me on. I know Dan isn't live with us right now, but I'm sure he'll be listening, and I want to thank him as well. Because this is his show too.
This is first and foremost his show.
I agree, and honestly, he's been a great addition to the network. I really enjoy listening to this, and I will also say for all the people that do watch on YouTube, that little notification bell is super helpful because you guys don't always go live at the same time every week. Occasionally, it's a new pop-up show or something gets rescheduled for whatever reason, and it helps you stay on top of that. So I appreciate that button. and I hope other people will make use of it as well.
Thanks for the plug, brother. We'll talk to you all soon. Take care.